o'clock Central African time.
A warm welcome to a chilly morning here on the Highveld here in Johannesburg, Jumbo, Africa. I'm Elvis Preslin.
I'm Kendall Makhamati.
We'll be with you until 12 o'clock. This is the Newsroom. Now, first and foremost, Eben is not here today. He's in a family bereavement, and we wish that everything goes well, and our condolences to Eben and his family. But focusing on decolonization. Today, education that would incorporate humanities knowledge, our systems into the curriculum of the universities and schools. We need to draft new policies that include practitioners, textbooks, teachers and lecturers. So some suggest, Kendall.
Absolutely, and we want to find out, should we be reorientating our thinking around the matter? Should we, for example, be changing the term decolonization to Africanization?
That's the question we pose to you. Let's take a look at what the poll is suggesting when we put it up on the poll there. So, 113 votes in.
Very interesting that a very good number, 64%, that's two-thirds, said yes, we should actually be changing it from decolonization to Africanization.
Only 36% are saying no, but you're also tweeting us on the subject. Let's take a look at what you're telling us. Gadani says, definitely sounds better and it gives the right idea, but if the changes to the system are not successful, it will ruin it.
Yes, after all, a term is a term until the action happens. Michael Bigham's-Toller says, yes, because we Africans are the majority in population, and decolonizing advances to the interests of Africans instead of Eurocentric interests.
There you go. Keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But we're also focusing on our question today. Parliament's Portfolio Committee now, they've been empowered. They can now investigate state capture.
Now, very interesting. It's been coming and now it's happening. The wheels are definitely rolling. And we want to find out from you, do you think that the Commission of Inquiry will resolve the issues and questions around state capture?
That's the question. Let's take a look at what you are telling us. This one coming from Jacob says, no, the Commission of Inquiry is just a waste of time. There's evidence on the table. What needs to be done is to prosecute those involved.
Interesting take on the matter there. Michael comes in again and says, nope, it's a waste of time and state funds, just like all the other commissions.
Now that is the serious stuff, but we also talk about money. There was a big money fight over the weekend.
You want to talk about money not being serious, Elvis? Let's talk about 4.5 billion rand that Floyd Mayweather has made. I want to find out from you, of course, the whole weekend we're talking about the money fight. It's happened. What do you make of the money fight is what we want to find out from you.
Was it a farce or was it a fight? So let's take a look at what you're telling us.
Oh, they're laughing all the way to the bank, most of them. Let's see what's being said on Twitter about this fight. Makau says, the speculation before the match was high, but Conor did not fulfill his promises. Greatest respect for Mayweather.
Yes, it was the Triple M, Money, Mayweather and McGregor. I personally miss real boxing, not these stage fights as some care. Those are some of your comments. Please keep them coming and we'll read them as we continue. But right now, let's take a look at your news headlines. The body of a third miner has been brought to the surface at Harmony Gold's Kusalethu mine in Carltonville in Gauteng's far west rand. A full bench of the Cape Town High Court will hear an application by the Women's Legal Centre today pertaining to the recognition of Muslim marriages and the rights of Muslim women. And sparks are expected to fly when the SACP meets the ANC's top six at a bilateral meeting today. I beg your pardon. Those are your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makhamati what's happening in the sports, and he'll take us through the news as well.
Elvis, thank you very much. Clearly, the change of season hasn't affected your body in any great way. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
By Messina, you touch for Pagasa, it's 1-0!
The student becomes the master as Benny McCarthy's Cape Town City makes it 2 out of 2 in all competitions this season against his former coach Gavin Hunt's Bidvis Wits, winning 1-0 in the latest encounter.
Firmino, Sadio Mane. Mane! Oh, wow!
Four-star Liverpool turns on the style as it dishes out a 4-0 thumping to Arsenal at Anfield in the Gunners' worst performance in recent times.
Floyd Mayweather has McGregor on the run, a shot, left hook, another hook, and it's over. Robert Bird says it's over.
A ruthless and clinical Floyd Mayweather finally earns his coveted 50-0 mantle as he scores a 10th round TKO over UFC champion Conor McGregor in the most highly anticipated boxing match this year. And of course, I'll be bringing all of this to you in more detail around about 10:40 or so. For now, let me bring you our top stories for the day. A body of a third miner trapped underground at Harmony Gold in Carltonville has reportedly been brought to the surface. Harmony Gold says rescue efforts are continuing at its Kusasa Letu mine until all miners trapped underground are brought to the surface. The incident follows seismic activity on Friday morning, which resulted in ground collapsing beneath the surface at the mine on Gauteng's West Rand. Mine officials say rescue teams have been working throughout the night. Conditions remain treacherous, making recovery efforts difficult. The mine company says it's providing counseling to the families who lost their loved ones. It will also assist with burial costs. The union AMCU says it will hold the mine responsible for the deaths. And in other news, a full bench of the Cape Town High Court will hear an application by the Women's Legal Centre today pertaining to recognition of Muslim marriages and the rights of Muslim women. The matter has been set down for 2 weeks. 3 judges have been appointed to hear the matter. According to the non-profit Law Centre, legal steps to ensure fairness between the spouses as well as ensuring children's rights when civil or customary marriages break down do not exist in Muslim and other religious marriages. The centre argues that there's no judicial oversight with Muslim divorces as there is in civil and customary divorces. It will rely on arguments that a range of constitutional rights are being violated, including the right to equality. And a manhunt is underway for a gunman who opened fire at the Hillbrow Theatre, killing 1 person and injuring 7 others yesterday morning. The incident happened during a live concert as a band was on stage, when the man suddenly jumped on stage and began shooting, demanding his cell phone back. Police say when the audience tried to intervene, the gunman fired shots at random. Police say 8 people were shot, 1 of whom has died. Several others were rushed to hospital. And sparks are expected to fly when the SACP, led by Blade Nzimande, meets the ANC's top 6, led by President Jacob Zuma, at a bilateral meeting today. Earlier this year, the SACP called on President Zuma to resign and barred him from speaking at any of its fora. The communists have also expressed disappointment at delays in instituting a judicial commission of inquiry into the capture of state. The SACP says the avalanche of emails exposing the corruption of their Guptas and the influence on SOEs makes the need for a commission of inquiry urgent. Selective disciplinary action against some members of parliament like Dr. Makosi Khoza over their siding with the opposition parties in the recent motion of no confidence against Zuma was also criticized by the SACP. Now, speaking to the SABC this morning, SACP First Deputy General Secretary Solima Paila touched on today's meeting with the ANC.
It's the first time we're meeting since our call for President Zuma to step. But in the main, we are taking forward the decision of our Congress that said we must participate in the coming elections and that conditionalities were put in that regard, including engagement with our allies, in particular the ANC. Therefore, we'll put in the main the question of the reconfiguration of the alliance at the core of our discussions, because that's one of the major considerations for how we take a decision going forward. And we need to report our structures in December on this matter. That's why when we have called for the Alliance Political Council, which the ANC had postponed, we realized that waiting for that, which the ANC is not prepared to convene at this moment, we rather convene this urgent bilateral so that we are able to share with them these concerns and all of us take collective responsibility for the wider complications and consequences for this decision to our revolution and to our being a political party or political movement that is in power.
And the Hawks and the NPA should investigate those implicated in the leaked Gupta emails. That's according to ANC Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, who's speaking at a COSATU rally in Seshego, Limpopo yesterday. He said those implicated in corrupt activities must be prosecuted. The ANC presidential hopeful says some within the government are on a looting spree and should be dealt with. The ANC's Women's League in Limpopo has also voiced its support for Ramaphosa ahead of the December conference. Ramaphosa also cautioned members not to buy votes in the upcoming ANC elective conference. That's in December. He says those choosing leaders must be influenced by the interests of the ANC.
As you exercise your choice on policy positions, on leadership positions, you must only be influenced by one thing, and one thing only: the interests of the African National Congress. It must only be the interests of the ANC that will influence you. You must not allow money to influence you. You must not allow people who will want to confuse you. You must just be guided by the values, the policies, and the principles of the African National Congress.
Meanwhile, Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises has now been empowered to investigate state capture. The legislature has approved additional resources for the inquiry. Despite this, it's unclear when the inquiry will officially get underway. Earlier this month, members of Parliament were told the cost of a probe would be exorbitant and that Parliament was unable to provide the services of an evidence leader. Barely 2 weeks ago, the Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises was also buckling under pressure to deliver on its oversight mandate. It sent a three-party delegation to appeal for more resources as they seek to get to the bottom of state capture. Mthutuzelo Vanara, who led the evidence in the parliamentary inquiry into the SABC board, has been seconded to lead this inquiry.
The complexity of the task, as well as the challenging nature of probing allegation of state capture through government parastatals, it is appropriate and necessary that this committee should be allocated the necessary resources to ensure that it is equal to the task, to ensure that it's able to do its job with thoroughness.
Given the fact that our mandate is now that we start with the Eskom debacle and then move on to Transnet and Denel, it means that a lot of resources are going to be required. A lot of experts in the field, such as forensic auditors, legal advisors, are going to be required. And we now feel that we are going to be armed and ready for our duty at hand.
We now have to be serious about our program, use the evidence leader, and ensure that the appropriate people who can assist the committee in its task are invited to the committee to give evidence.
And so we are asking you on this Monday morning, will the Commission of Inquiry resolve the questions around state capture? Your thoughts on the matter are definitely wanted, and you must make sure that you get in touch with us on our Twitter and Facebook pages. We're also conducting a poll where we're asking you, should we change the term decolonization to Africanization? As you know, this matter of reorientating our thinking is one of the key pillars to this debate. Let's go to Elvis to start that conversation.
Thank you, Kendall, and we'll read those comments in a short while. Now, the call for decolonizing education is not a new one. According to some experts, this is a conversation that has been taking place since the 1950s and 60s in the context of decolonizing the struggle against colonial rule. Now, it first emerged as an idea for an all-inclusive education system. However, with this issue being brought up more aggressively in the past year, what active changes have taken place since the onset of democracy, and what can we expect to be done within the next year? Joining us now in studio is the Department of Education spokesperson, Elijah Mhlanga. Mr. Mhlanga, very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Morning, thank you.
Now, we ask our viewers the question of whether or not it should still be decolonization or Africanization. Your thoughts on that?
That's an interesting question, but I think decolonization tells you where you come from. Africanization tells you where you're going. So I think they can both work. it's the content of what you're trying to do that really matters.
Now, if we look at decolonization, what does it actually mean, though? Because some people have got different perspectives in terms of what decolonization actually means.
Well, even academics themselves, they have different explanations of that. They throw all sorts of ideas about what it could mean. But what we believe it means is that we need to move away from what the colonialists have imposed on us when they came to Africa and brought with them certain concepts that we needed to use as part of our lives. And all of those things manifested themselves across different spheres of life, whether it's science, or whether it's education, or whether it's history, or mathematics, even the English language, and how we view the world. And we believe that it's about time that we find a new way of looking at it, because in that process of colonization, there was a process of denigrating what we had as Africans originally. And we started to look down upon our own ways of thinking and our own knowledge systems in favor of what the colonialists had brought to us.
Does it suggest that we change our curriculum, that we change our textbook, that we change our history altogether, or is there certain parts of it that need to be configured altogether?
It means change will have to happen because what we have now, for example, they say that some of the disciplines that we have right now, whether it's engineering or whether it's accounting or whatever, those things are historical. They were created because you were trying to solve a particular problem that existed at the time. What is it that we have in Africa today that is peculiar only to the continent that we can do? Can we create our own industries that can solve our own problems? Those are the things that make the change to be unavoidable, because we need to look at our own circumstances and say, what is it that we need to do? That's why people always say that you cannot import solutions to an environment where they might not work. We need to find African solutions to African problems. So that's what we are talking about. So definitely the curriculum material that we use in our schools will have to change, and the way we teach, the terminologies and concepts that we use will also have to change to reflect our own indigenous knowledge systems.
Let's take a look at our education system currently. What was done since the onset of democracy and the changes that has transpired over the years to make sure that we get to that point where we can decolonize ourselves?
Well, it's a process. You know, when we experienced democracy in '94, there were changes that took place in '95. There were discussions about the curriculum that the country should adopt and what is it that matters to us. And you will know that since then there have been various changes that have taken place. It's a process, it's going to be a long process, but we believe we are getting there. If you look at the Constitution, we aligned ourselves with what the Constitution has to say. Schools Act, same way, but in that process we have to also infuse the appropriate curriculum that will ensure that our learners obtain the necessary skills that will prepare them for this new world that we are talking about. But also in the past 5 years, there are specific things that we have been doing to try revise our education system, talk about the introduction of African languages in our schools. We realized that there were schools that were not offering any African language whatsoever. So you can't talk about decolonization if there are still schools that are not offering any indigenous African language whatsoever. That's why now we are forcing those schools to do that. And there were about 3,500. The number has come down now because they've been rolling out that implementation. But we've also had the minister setting up ministerial task teams to look at mathematics in our schools. What is it? How are we teaching it? And what can we do? There's currently another task team now looking into our textbooks. What material is there? Is there discrimination? What else is there that is missing that is African in its approach that we need to make sure that we give it prominence? So there have been various things that we've been doing to try strengthen our curriculum, making sure that it is aligned to our own dynamics in South Africa and in Africa broadly.
When we talk about language, are we talking about incorporating all languages in all the different schools, or will it be per province of a particular language set that will be used?
It's per province, because remember, for example, in KZN, there is isiZulu as a dominant language, so you can't impose Sesotho there if you cannot find teachers in that province to teach in that language, so to teach that language. So we are saying school governing bodies, parents need to make that decision, choose a language which they prefer in the school based on the numbers or other dynamics that might be suitable for their circumstances. But we want an indigenous African language, particularly those that are official, to be included in the curriculum of all our schools in South Africa as part and parcel of moving forward in this Africanization process that you spoke about.
Talking about official languages, we have 11 of them. One of the minority groups, the Khoikhoi and the San, they are suggesting that their language is part and parcel of the national emblem. And yet, the Khoikhoi language, or the Khoikhoi Khubab, is marginalized. They are not being official, they've not been made official, and of course the language is struggling to get to all the people that's supposed to speak that language.
It's a fair criticism, it's a fair comment, it's a fair concern. I think as government we need to take that into consideration. We've been engaging with that community for some time now. I know that even the Pan-African Language Board has also spoken to us about that language, particularly in the Northern Cape, asking us what is it that we are going to do, because we really need to accommodate all languages, especially those that have a historical significance in our country. We need to make sure that those are brought on board as well, and not give priority to languages that only came to Africa much later. So we need to make sure, because some of our languages are dying, by the way.
Yes.
And we need to make sure that we protect them and do all that is possible to make sure that they stay in the school environment and are protected. We have writers who will create material that will stay, and people must read it and use it, because the other challenge is that parents in the homes these days, they prefer to speak English with their children, and that's a challenge.
You need to be decolonized at home first.
We need to decolonize the mind. We need to change the mindset and say, speak your own language. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Some parents will say, no, but where am I going to use this in the workplace? It is very important. Those that speak and use these languages, they have more opportunities of generating an income than other people who cannot in many other spheres, even in the workplace. So we need to make sure that we do everything that we can as a government, as a society, to make sure that our languages are protected and promoted.
The court recently ruled that it shouldn't just be Christianity to be taught in schools. Is that perhaps the start of decolonizing our education system?
It's part and parcel of that, but that particular provision was always there in the Schools Act. We always say that all religions need to be treated in the same way. None should be promoted above the other. So what the court did was to really emphasize what the Schools Act was already saying. And we appreciate that, because there was beginning to be unequal treatment when it comes to religion and observances in school. So we are saying your religion should be able to find space and expression in a school environment without you feeling like you're unwanted or unwelcome in a school. So those that feel they need to practice certain religious observances shouldn't infringe on the rights of those that do not want to participate at that particular time.
In closing, we start off by asking you the question whether it should be Africanized or whether it should be decolonized. So you suggest there must be a hybrid. So it could be, and I've written it down here, Africolonization.
I don't know about that.
Mr. Mhlanga, I thank you so much for joining us here in studio. There you have it. That was the Department of Education spokesperson, Elijah Mhlanga. Now, today we're asking you that question on the poll. Should we change the term decolonization to Africanization? There it is on your screen right now. Let's take a look at what the numbers suggest. 138 votes in, 23 hours left to vote. 65% of you are saying the term should change to Africanization. 35%, Mr. Mhlanga, are saying no.
Wow.
Well, there you have it. Let's take a look at what you are tweeting us. Mahafa says, that would be great if we change the term decolonizing education to Africanization. Onuke Christian says, the name doesn't really matter. The substance, the quality, the intent, and the delivery mode are the real concerns. And Katlejo says, it's not about decolonizing education. It's about a weak education system in South Africa. Decolonizing and Africanization are just words. We need transformation. Well, there you have it. Those are some of your comments. We'll read some of them as we continue. But let's now take a look at what's happening on Twitter. And we start off with #RiaVaya bus. And there's a bus station in the East Rand that has been torched. That's according to the city of Johannesburg. It's believed to be part of the violent protest action taking place in Riverlea. The area of Main Reef Road has been affected. Now, all motorists are told to use alternative routes and do not go through that area in River Lee. Then a third miner has been rescued after being trapped underground since Friday when a collapse occurred at Harmony Gold's Kusaletu mine. Operations have been suspended. Hashtag Harmony Gold. Then in some sports news, the big Mayweather match, the big boxing match of the weekend, the top trend on social media this morning. Hashtag Mayweather McGregor. The Irish fighter was knocked out after a long struggle. Well, it's a technical knockout, wasn't it? With the moneymaker who took the title. You can also follow the hashtags Floyd and hashtags Las Vegas and catch up on that fight and the many memes that are doing the rounds. Look at that one there, Mayweather and McGregor. And our golden girl, Caster Semenya, has once again proved her talent as she smashes the world record in the 600 meters. There you have it. Oh, she's on fire, isn't she? And in the U.S., Texas battles Hurricane Harvey, the worst flood in the area in 500 years. Now it's believed that hundreds of people are trapped. Helicopters and boats are helping to deal with the thousands of calls for help as the catastrophic weather continues to pound Texas. Hashtag Hurricane Harvey. Now the picture of the day comes from Hands Cuffed and it's captioned, McGregor, why am I seeing stars? Mayweather, focus. You should only be seeing one. Hashtag Mayweather McGregor. What do you make of that fight? Did you enjoy it over the weekend? That's a question also we posed to you today. What did you make of the Money Mayweather fight? It was the Triple M, some suggest. Money, Mayweather and McGregor. Now the comment of the day comes from Mbegizeli. And he says the Hillbrow Theatre incident showed just how normalized violence is in South Africa. Someone almost killed 8 people because of a lousy cell phone. Well, that's what happened here on our doorstep just around the corner. Let's now take a look at what's happening in our courts, and we start off in Durban, where 5 suspects are expected to appear in the Escort Magistrates Court for a bail application. They are suspected of cannibalism. The suspects were charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder. In Johannesburg, 8 officials of the City of Johannesburg Revenue Department are scheduled to appear in the Johannesburg Specialized Commercial Crimes Court. They were arrested on Friday for allegedly inflating property prices and property refund prices, amounting to millions of rands. And in the Western Cape, where a suspect believed to be a clover farmer on the West Coast has been arrested at Malmesbury on charges of murder and attempted murder. He allegedly shot dead a man and wounded another over the weekend. The suspect will appear in court soon. Now, we'll keep you updated on all these issues and all these cases, so you have to stay tuned on Channel 404 on The Newsroom. Let's throw forward now and take a look at what's happening tomorrow on the show. We will be talking about, wait for it, early in the morning, 9 o'clock, breakfast time, we'll be speaking about cannibalism. That's following today's court appearance of those 5 suspects who were allegedly found in possession of body parts at Escort in KwaZulu-Natal in the Midlands there. The suspects were arrested after one of them went to a local police station voluntarily admitting to eating human flesh. Be on the lookout for that one. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after that and continue this discussion. Decolonizing education or Africanization. Is that perhaps the term? We'll be back.
Well, a very good morning and welcome to AM News Live at 10:00 hours across all Central Africa regions.
A fitting send-off for a revolutionary giant, a life dedicated in service of the people.
The results means that the Swallows are out of the ABC Municipal League and drop to the amateur fourth tier of South African football, the SAB League.
Tune in on AM News every Saturday and Sunday from 10 hours.
The South African education system is still in the industrial age with a culture of testing and standardization that's leading to students becoming knowledge consumers rather than knowledge producers. Future Nation School says while South Africa ranks 49th in the WEF Global Competitiveness Report, education is still a big concern. Future Nation say that we need an educational approach that makes us globally competitive whilst understanding and preparing our children for our unique African context. Now, to discuss the decolonization of the education in South Africa, in our studios, we are joined by Mr. Sizwe Nkasana, the head of Sofiso Learning Group and the founder of Future Nation Schools. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the inviting me.
This sounds like a very new venture. Tell us more about it, number one, and what made you decide to go into education for that matter?
Well, I decided to get into education because, it's an area which I'm always been very passionate about. My father was a school teacher, a math and science teacher, so I grew up in the home with books and teaching and, discussions about education, even from a very, very young age. So when I finished corporate life, it was quite natural that, this was the thing that I was going to do. And I work both in the public space as well as in the private space. In other words, I work with the National Education Collaboration Trust, I work with the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, but I also decided that it was important, especially in the context of this whole debate and discussion about Africanization or decolonization, that we started a chain of schools that was affordable, that focus on some of the innovations and things that will prepare our children for the 21st century.
Now, there are many different private schools in the country, and if I just think about it, I think about the Kiro Group as well, which has also started their own chain of private schools. What makes the Future Nation Schools different?
Well, the number of key differentiators. For starters, the training that we take our teachers through is one that makes sure that, we prepare those teachers to impart knowledge, but also to coordinate and facilitate the process of learning and teaching. So we go through a really rigorous process of how we pick our teachers, how we select them, how they get trained. But what's really different in terms of what we offer in Future Nation Schools is, for instance, we focus on African studies through not just as a language, but also throughout everything that we do and all the other subjects that we teach in our schools. Secondly, we teach entrepreneurship and leadership. Thirdly, we teach robotics and coding from a very young age. From primary school already, we offer coding because it is particularly important that we're preparing our children to be problem solvers, to be entrepreneurs, to understand technology, to make technology work and just not swipe, iPads and things like that. They must know how to make these programs work and create content. And this is what Future Nation is all about.
It's not just all about consumption, it's also about producing it, and that's very important what you're talking about.
Absolutely. So, for instance, if you take our grades 1 and grade 2s, we have a publishing company that we've created called Sofiso Publishers, and it encourages young people, to write, to create stories, to create content, to use technology to create games and, content, because as you correctly say, we can't just be consumers. At the moment, when you look at a lot of the games or even applications that are used in our cell phones, that are used on our computers and so on, very few of them are actually developed and created in Africa. And if they are, they're probably not created by African people.
That sounds very exciting, because I haven't heard something like that before. But talk to me again about languages. You are providing English as a basis, and of course you provide all the African languages as well.
Correct.
And including Khoi in the San, or the Khoikhoi language. Is that correct?
Well, we encourage our children to be aware of the languages of the continent. The Khoi and San people are really important. You know, they go back to many, many centuries in this continent. And there's a huge amount that we can learn from the Khoi and the San people in terms of the science which they have, the knowledge which they have, and so on, and which actually has been undermined.
Now, we're asking our viewers, of course, this morning. It's a poll that we're conducting, and we want to find out from them whether or not it should be decolonizing or it should be Africanization of our education system. There's on the screen right now. Let's take a look at the numbers. It suggests that we have 150 votes in. 65% are saying yes, we should Africanize our education system rather than decolonize. I would like to get your thoughts on that.
We actually need to do both. You know, and I fully agree with Mr. Elijah Mhlanga, who was here before me, that you can't do one without the other. Of course, when you look at our content, whether it's mathematics or science or geography or history and so on, you're going to find a lot of examples which are based on a colonial concept and context. And so it is important to change that. But whilst we're changing so, it is important to Africanize the content, the knowledge, because there's a lot of knowledge that we have as African people. In fact, a lot of us, you find that whether it's religion or health, or what happens when someone gets born and they grow up, and actually when they die, there's a lot of this duality that we practice as African people. But a lot of this knowledge was obviously undermined, was never written down. It was passed from one generation to the next. And it is important that we document this knowledge. We create this knowledge, that we create and develop our language, especially in the technical areas, mathematics or science and so on. If you look at, for instance, what Afrikaners did or what the Chinese did and so on, and as well as other languages, some of these mathematical concepts or scientific concepts were always there, but maybe they were given a particular name and language by the Romans or the English people and so on. We've got to be able to interpret them in our language. And it's been proven many times over that if children understand their indigenous language, their home languages better, including in abstract concepts, they actually do better in subjects like mathematics and science. So that's what we need to do.
We've seen it in Western nations happening, and even in the Eastern nations. And talking about that, Mandarin is also one of the languages that you are offering.
Yes.
And why is that the case?
Well, because we want to prepare our students for the future. Of course, they will learn English. They will learn, the indigenous languages, which we're promoting very, very aggressively. But it is important also that they're exposed to the rest of the world. So we have quite a few Chinese teachers. We teach Mandarin from preschool already, because it is important to enable our people to go anywhere in the world and become proud about who they are, but at the same time be able to converse and do business with people from other languages.
As a Sifiso learning group, will you only be focusing on affluence areas, or will you go into townships where people need this type of access to education?
Yeah, so when you look at, for instance, we have, this is our first year of operation. We have 5 preschools, 2 primaries and 2 high schools. One of our schools is just on the border with Soweto, with Meadowlands, in a place called Vloohof. It's an affordable housing area. So we'll try and make it as accessible and affordable as possible.
How will this bring a change into decolonizing education when the tertiary education has not changed?
Well, the whole education system has to change. And it's really great that, the students raise this issue about decolonization. So you're now starting to see a number of higher education institutions, have, for instance, introduced African studies, African knowledge systems. They've created divisions, some of them, that, for instance, are creating content in language, that are creating dictionaries and promoting indigenous language and so on. So we're starting to see that movement happen in the higher education space as well.
My good sir, I thank you so much, and all the best of luck with the Sifiso Learning Group.
Thank you. That
was Mr. Sizwe Nkasana, the head of Sifiso Learning Group and founder of Future Nation Schools. Now, you remember him, CEO of Telkom. He turned that organization around. Well, we're also conducting a poll, and that's why we're asking you this question. We ask him the question as well. Well, take a look at the poll. Let's take a look at the numbers as well as what you are tweeting as we're asking whether or not the term decolonizing education to Africanization should take place. So far, 150 votes in. 35%, only 35% of you are saying no. The rest, 65% are saying yes. Let's take a look at what you are telling us on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. This one coming from Sipelele says, Chuna Achebe, John Dube, Jan Smuts, and all made indelible contributions to African philosophy. It shouldn't be sidelined, especially Chuna Achebe, When Things Fall Apart. You remember that book? Sabello says, yes, because Africanization talks about us and where we are going as Africans. Write our own curriculum that speaks about us. Chanawa Chebe, I truly, really enjoy that book. He talks about us as Africans being consumers, right? We should be producers. Let's take a look at what's happening on our Facebook page. The Democratic Alliance is calling on all South Africans to sign a petition for early emergency elections. The party says it believes the ANC has lost the confidence of the majority of South Africans and that Parliament requires a new beginning through the ballot. Then the woman who was rescued by the Hawks at Ngobo in the Eastern Cape after 3 years of forced marriage has been taken to a place of safety. Her husband is 26 years old and unemployed. And finally, the Democratic Alliance has urged Gauteng Premier David Makhura to step in and ensure that the Provincial Health Department can meet its pressing financial obligations and plan a way forward to provide quality health care with minimal negligence claims. You can find all of this and more on our Facebook page. Let's go to the newspapers now and take a look at the front pages from around the globe, and we start off in the United Kingdom. The Guardian reports that Donald Trump, the president of the US, will visit Texas tomorrow. The White House said as Tropical Storm Harvey brought intense rainfall that threatened historic flooding in Houston. Freeways turning into rivers and water rushing into homes in America's fourth largest city. Moving to China, the South China Morning Post says that severe tropical storm Pakhar battled down on Hong Kong and Macau yesterday, disrupting flights and transport in two cities that had barely recovered from the hammering inflicted by Typhoon Hato last week. Finally, in Israel, the Jerusalem Post reports new research has shown that graduates of the state religious school system earn 18% less on average than their peers from the state secular school system. Well, what do you make of that? That's a very interesting story. Well, those are your newspapers from around the globe. Let's now take a break. We continue our discussion, decolonizing education or Africanization, after the break.
What guides us? Is it something you can touch, hear, feel, or see? What leads us onto greater experiences? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? The advice of our elders? Or is it the actions of our people? The strength of our beliefs? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcast is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
When I was passing the casino, I said, that edge came, said, I'll just try, you never know. You might go home with 80,000, times 4 the amount that you have. And that stupid day, I lost all my money.
Never allow glamorous lifestyles to push you beyond your means.
The awakening moment was that 2007, when I left my children alone. I realized this is hurting me.
Ask for professional help if gambling is controlling you. Know when to stop.
I faced reality that, you know what, for you there's no quick reach, you know, so you just have to work hard. So it's gone.
For all your uplifting stories, catch Bupilong every Friday at 17:30.
Now, from the recent lowering of the pass mark and South Africa being ranked second worst in the world for mathematics, just as we head into the industrial 4.0 or the industrial to the statute debate, as well as the fees must fall protests, bringing to light a need for decolonizing education, it appears that our education system is out of sync with the current state of society. But there are several theories as to how to go about transforming our education system. Some experts say that we need to first define what decolonizing education really means. Others say that we need to decolonize the mind, while some suggest simply beginning with language will change the status quo. Joining us from our Cape Town studios is retired fellow of the University of Cape Town, Professor Tim Crow. Now, he has over 40 years of experience in the academic field. Professor, very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning to you.
Decolonizing education means different things to different people. What does the term mean to you, Professor?
Well, I see it as two sides of the same coin. Over centuries, theories that were developed in Europe and other Western areas were taught as dogma at South African universities. Some of them work, some of them don't work, some of them have to be modified. But the reality is that we have African phenomena to deal with. I deal with evolution, and mainly from looking at it from a bird perspective. My surname is Crow, and I work on birds. So what I've done over my career is to take the theories largely sourced from Europe and the United States, and to a lesser extent South America, and adapted them to my work and my colleagues and students' work here on African birds and other groups. I even had a student who worked on scorpions.
Mm-hmm. Now, we're asking our viewers this morning, Professor, whether or not we should change decolonization to Africanization, that term. What is your take on that, or do you think that there should be a crossover between the two?
I prefer the term Afro-relevance in the sense that any researcher, whether they work in the humanities, science, medicine, engineering, they're trying to address challenges, problems, ideas that are relevant to Africa. So I use the word relevance rather than centrism or Africanization, because they have those terms, I think, have a lot of baggage that I don't want to have to deal with.
Mm. But what does this term decolonizing education suggest that we need to begin with in order to transform our system into a more inclusive education program?
Well, decolonization is a word that's only recently come onto the stage. Up until a few years ago, the word was transformation. And in fact, at my university, UCT, University of Cape Town, we have a deputy vice chancellor whose specific task is transformation. And transformation, of course, just means change. And of course, what we want is adaptive change to make, in my case, the University of Cape Town a better place to educate people who can deal with problems down the street, throughout the country, throughout the continent, throughout the world. But always starting with an African focus, but making sure that when and where possible, if there are universal truths to discover, we discover them here in Africa and don't wait to get word from New York or Los Angeles.
And where do we start, Professor? Do we start in primary school and take it up all the way to high school and then tertiary? Or where do we start as a whole?
I think you should start in the family, in that the parents should, as far as possible, be made aware of basic ideas. The one that I'm very, very, very familiar with is the notion of race. And in human beings, the term race is a biological term that from the 17th, 18th, 19th century was horribly misused to denigrate people that you wanted to exploit. And my personal research back in the 70s was on the helmeted guinea fowl, which is the most widespread bird in Africa. It occurs from Morocco down here to Cape Town. And I looked at races of these birds. And if you give me a bird from a bird, I can tell you, a guinea fowl, I can tell you by looking at its feathers and various other aspects of its anatomy where it comes from. So the race actually applies in guinea fowl. It absolutely never did, never will apply to human beings. We're a much more homogeneous entity, certainly biologically, and I would also argue culturally, socially, politically, and so forth. So race, I think, is a very, very important issue that needs to be dealt with so that you can move on away from self-identity politics and so forth into looking at things that we can agree on and work together on.
Now, you talk about Afro-relevance, but one observational disconnect is that minority languages are still being taught to the majority of the people in South Africa. White children can't speak African languages, or most of them as yet. Is that not perhaps also a starting point?
Oh, I think so. If I had grandchildren in this country, sadly for me, my grandkids, I even have a great-grandson, live in America because their parents choose to do so. I would insist that they learn languages. When I was a high school student, I studied Russian, for example, to get some sort of perspective on international languages. But sure, here, the problem in Southern Africa is that there are so many different languages. Even if you divide them up into groups, you have to pick carefully which one to choose to use to apply in whatever way you want.
Now, you were quite vocal during the statue debate where students vandalized Cecil John Rhodes' statues in Cape Town. What did you observe at that point in time, Professor, and what was wrong with the action at that point in time?
Oh, I think that I have no even dreams of admiring Cecil John Rhodes. He was a horrible, horrible, horrible man. And did many things that even at the time were disgraceful. What I object to was that the university administration allowed the problem to fester and fester and fester. What should have been done, to my mind, in the 1990s, they should have taken the statue and put it somewhere else on campus or consolidated it in the Rhodes Memorial, where anyone who wishes to visit it could, and take it away from campus. What I didn't like, and I still don't like, the tactics that are employed to get done what the perpetrators want done. There was no need to use human excrement on a statue, something more dignified that is respected amongst all peoples, regardless of their cultural origins, could have been done to do that. But I think really the university administration didn't miss the boat. They missed the aircraft carrier when they didn't deal with Rhodes statue and other very obvious elements of the university 20 years ago.
Yes. In closing, Professor, the future of perhaps changing our education system, what you call Afro-relevance, how possible is that?
Oh, I think it's very possible. All you need to do is to identify a concept. In the case that I talked about this morning, race, for example. If intelligent people who are willing to read and talk to one another addressed it, I'm talking about not just biologists, but sociologists, historians, political scientists, the whole spectrum of humanity from a rural farmer to the president of the country could come first to see the unity of the peoples in the country, and then you progress from there. But every problem that you have to address has to be addressed with African examples and using theories and approaches that work in Africa. Virtually everything I was taught as a young man, I've abandoned and developed my own way of thinking as a consequence of spending 45 years here working on African birds.
Well, as the Education Department would say, African solutions for African problems. I thank you so much for your time, sir.
It's a pleasure.
That was Professor Tim Crow coming to us from Cape Town there. Right now, it's time to take a look at your weather. Remember, to participate in that poll, we'll be asking you whether or not it should be decolonizing or Africanizing our education system.
Right, let's take a look at your weather details. We have a low pressure system along the coastal regions of Western Cape, resulting to offshore wind flow along the coastal regions of Eastern Cape and strong winds over the interior of Northern Cape up to 50 kilometers per hour. Going to the northern parts, we are expecting 30% chance of showers due to a high pressure system bringing in moisture over the northeastern parts, and we will have 30% chance of showers, but over Skukuza in Mpumalanga up to 60% chance of showers expected today. Otherwise, partly cloudy skies and morning fog patches over the high-lying areas. Tomorrow, still expecting 30% chance of showers over KwaZulu-Natal and most parts of Lesotho, the far northern parts of Eastern Cape. Western Cape, another cold front making its way, bring up to 60% chance of showers along the coastal regions. Otherwise, clear skies over the southern hemisphere, and over Madagascar, 30% chance of showers over the eastern parts. A warning of high fire danger over the interior of Northern Cape with strong winds up to 50 kilometers per hour, and gale force winds along the coastal regions up to 70 kilometers per hour. A maximum of 25 is expected in Pretoria, partly cloudy skies, 19 Polokwane, and 24 for Sutherland. Clear skies can be expected over Botswana for today, going to Zimbabwe. A maximum of 30 in Victoria Falls and 24 in Harare. 30% chance of showers expected in Beira with a maximum of 24. Going to Madagascar, partly cloudy skies and very isolated showers over the eastern parts. Over Victoria, a maximum of 32 and 30% chance of thunder showers expected over the central interior. Isolated over the interior of DRC. Going to the northern parts, 30% chance of showers. Juba at a maximum of 30 and 29 in Mombasa. Over the Sahara Desert, we're still expecting clear skies, but over the southern parts, up to 60% chance of showers going to the interior of Nigeria and Central Republic of Africa. That is all. Ndawiyando.
Many saying that the former minister is now endorsing Ramaphosa as the next president. Campaign time, Prof?
Yeah.
So early.
Let's at least accept that people have a right to expressing themselves in terms of who they support.
But what is lacking very seriously is that there is no that leadership role that is played by the leadership to say, we haven't opened succession and let us deal with those that are campaigning openly, because we haven't opened it as the leadership of the ANC.
What we need in this country is that we need a ruling party or a leading party to be able to engage with issues that affect the people.
Our people campaign openly. It weakens the organization. In fact, it makes the policies of the ANC even more popular.
Stay tuned to Media Monitor and catch on analysts unpacking top stories every Sunday from 9 a.m.
Meningitis is a potentially deadly disease that affects more than 1 million people worldwide each year.
Well, it's an infection of the lining of the brain and the spinal cord. And it's caused by a variety of bacteria.
And also, importantly, with fungal meningitis, there's no transmission from person to person.
In South Africa and elsewhere in the world, the ministries of health, etc., have recognized this as an important disease to prevent. and vaccines have been introduced into immunization, routine immunization programs.
It's really important to prevent, and the best way to prevent is to have people know their HIV status, start antiretroviral treatment as soon as possible.
For all your health news, join Health Talk every Saturday from 9 to 10.
A warm welcome to the second hour here in the newsroom, Jumbo Africa. I'm Elvis Preslin.
I'm Kendall Makhamat.
We'll be with you until 12 o'clock today. We're talking about decolonizing today. Decolonizing education that would incorporate humanities knowledge systems into the current curriculum of the universities and our schools. We need to draft new policies and include practitioners' textbooks, as well as teachers and lecturers.
And that's why today we're conducting this particular poll. We want to get you involved in the conversation. What do you think? Do you think we need to change the term decolonization to Africanization?
Well, here it is. 165 votes in so far. Still the majority, 65% are saying, yes, we should Africanize our education system. 35% are saying no. Also, of course, a number of terms from our specialists and our analysts coming through. But let's see what you are telling us. On the Twitter handle.
Katlego comes in with saying it's not about decolonizing education, it's about a weak education system in South Africa. Decolonizing and Africanization are just words. We need transformation.
Onuke says the name doesn't really matter. The substance, the quality, the intent and the delivery mode are the real concerns. Those are some of your comments. Please keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue, but we're also focusing on Parliament's Portfolio Committee on public enterprises. They have now been empowered to investigate state capture.
All right, the wheels are finally moving, but we want to find out from you. What do you believe? Do you think this Commission of Inquiry will resolve the questions around state capture or not?
Let's take a look at what you're telling us on the Twitter handle. Mandla says, there's nothing like state capture here.
Move on, nothing going on. As you were. Mahlomole says, no, we want accountability, not confirmation of what we know. Heads should have started rolling from day one of its release.
Well, there you have it. We'll read more of those a little bit later. On our sports question today, the big money fight over the weekend. Lots of people got up very early in the morning to watch the fight, Kendall. That's why we're asking you.
Yeah, interesting. People woke up for a 2 o'clock fight, only happened at about 6 in the morning. A lot of people were up in arms about it, but it went all 10 rounds. Well, not all, went 10 rounds, and before it got stopped on a technicality. Want to find out from you, though, what do you make of the money fight? Was it everything that you expected it to be?
Let's see what you are telling us on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Didani says, it was a good fight. Connor surprised and impressed many viewers, but the android known as Floyd was just too seasoned for him.
Michael Biam's toilet says, it was a glorious occasion, and I think Floyd Mayweather retired too soon. He's still in great shape. The man's in his 40s. He's 40 years old now.
40 years old and still ripped. promise you. Very good. Well, that's where we got to leave it. Let's now take a look at your news headlines. The body of a third miner has been brought to the surface at Harmony Gold's Kusaletu mine in Carltonville and Gauteng's far west Rand. A full bench of the Cape Town High Court will hear an application by the Women's League Legal Centre today pertaining to the recognition of Muslim marriages and the rights of Muslim women. Sparks are expected to fly when the SACP meets the ANC's top six at a bilateral meeting today. Now, those are all your headlines, and before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall what's happening in the sports on the sports front as well as in the news.
Elvis, thank you very much. Yes, I will be bringing you the news shortly, but let's bring you what's happening in the sports world first. Good morning to you.
By Messina, you touch for Padasa, it's 1-0!
The student becomes the master as Benny McCarthy's Cape Town City makes it 2 out of 2 in all competitions this season against his former coach Gavin Hunt's Bidvest, winning 1-0 in the latest encounter.
Firmino, Sadio Mane.
Four-star Liverpool turns on the style as it dishes out a 4-0 thumping to Arsenal at Anfield in the Gunners' worst performance in recent times.
Floyd Mayweather has McGregor on the run, a shot, left hook, another hook, and it's over. Robert Bird says it's over.
A ruthless and clinical Floyd Mayweather finally earns his coveted 50-0 mantle as he scores a 10th round TKO over UFC champion Conor McGregor in the most highly anticipated boxing match this year. Of course, respectively, they made, what, $97 million for Conor and some $300 million for Floyd Mayweather. Smiling all the way to the bank, they say. Good morning to you. These are our top stories for the day. Emergency services teams deployed to the Harmony Gold mine in Carltonville say the chances of survival for the remaining 2 trapped miners are slim, but not all hope is lost. With 3 bodies already brought to the surface, the conditions underground are not conducive and therefore making it hard to predict if the remaining miners are still alive. The incident follows seismic activity on Friday morning, which resulted in ground collapsing beneath the surface at the mine on Gauteng's West Rand. Mine officials say rescue teams have been working throughout the night. Conditions remain treacherous, making recovery efforts difficult. The mine company says it's providing counseling to the families who have lost their loved ones. It will also assist with burial costs. In the meantime, Union AMCU says it will hold the mine responsible for the deaths. And a full bench of the Cape Town High Court will hear an application by the Women's Legal Centre today pertaining to recognition of Muslim marriages and rights of Muslim women. The matter has been set down for 2 weeks. 3 judges have been appointed to hear the matter. According to the Non-Profit Law Centre, legal steps to ensure fairness between the spouses, as well as ensuring children's rights when civil or customary marriages break down, do not exist in Muslim and other religious marriages. The centre argues that there's no judicial oversight with Muslim divorces, as there is in civil and customary divorces. It will rely on arguments that a range of constitutional rights are being violated, including the right to equality. And a manhunt is underway for a gunman who opened fire at the Hillbrow Theatre, killing 1 person and injuring 7 others yesterday morning. The incident happened during a live concert as a band was on stage performing, when the man suddenly jumped on stage and began shooting and demanding his cell phone back. Police say when the audience tried to intervene, the gunman fired shots at random. Police say 8 people were shot, 1 of whom has died. Several others were rushed to hospital. And sparks are expected to fly when the SACP, led by Bladin Nzimande, meets the NC's top 6, led by President Jacob Zuma, at a bilateral meeting today. Earlier this year, the SACP called on President Zuma to resign and barred him from speaking at any of its fora. The communists have also expressed disappointment at delays in instituting a judicial commission of inquiry into the capture of state. The SACP says the avalanche of emails exposing the corruption of the Guptas and their influence on SOEs makes the need for a commission of inquiry urgent. Selective disciplinary action against some members of parliament like Dr. Khoikhoi over their siding with the opposition parties in the recent motion of no confidence against Zuma was also criticized by the SACP. Now, speaking to the SABC this morning, SACP First Deputy General Secretary Solima Paila touched on today's meeting with the ANC.
It's the first time we're meeting since our call for President Zuma to step. In the main, we are taking forward the decision of our Congress that said we must participate in the coming elections, and that conditionalities were put in that regard, including engagement with our allies, in particular the ANC. Therefore, we'll put in the main the question of the reconfiguration of the alliance at the core of our discussions, because that's one of the major considerations for how we take a decision going forward. And we need to report our structures in December on this matter. That's why when we have called for the Alliance Political Council, which the ANC had postponed, we realized that waiting for that, which the ANC is not prepared to convene at this moment, we rather convene this urgent bilateral so that we are able to share with them these concerns, and all of us take collective responsibility for the wider complications and consequences for this decision to our revolution and to our being a political party or political movement that is in power.
Now, the Hawks and the NPA should investigate those implicated in the leaked Gupta emails. That, at least, is according to ANC Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, who was speaking at a COSATU rally in Seshego, Limpopo yesterday. He said those implicated in corrupt activities must be prosecuted. The ANC presidential hopeful says some within the government are on a looting spree and should be dealt with. The ANC's Women's League in Limpopo has also voiced their support for Ramaphosa ahead of the December conference. Ramaphosa also cautioned members not to buy votes in the upcoming ANC elective conference in December. He says those choosing leaders must be influenced by the interests of the ANC.
As you exercise your choice on policy positions, on leadership positions, you must only be influenced by one thing, and one thing only: the interests of the African National Congress. It must only be the interests of the ANC that will influence you. You must not allow money to influence you. You must not allow people who will want to confuse you. You must just be guided by the values, the policies, and the principles of the African National Congress.
Meanwhile, Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises has now been empowered to investigate state capture. The legislature has approved that additional resources for the inquiry be made available. Despite this, it's unclear when the inquiry will officially get underway. Earlier this month, members of Parliament were told the cost of a probe would be exorbitant and that Parliament was unable to provide the services of an evidence leader. Barely 2 weeks ago, the Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises was also buckling under pressure to deliver on its oversight mandate. It sent a three-party delegation to appeal for more resources as they seek to get to the bottom of state capture. Ntutu Zelvanara, who led the evidence in the parliamentary inquiry into the SABC board, has been seconded to lead this inquiry.
The complexity of the task, as well as the challenging nature of probing allegation of state capture through government parastatals, it is appropriate and necessary that this committee should be allocated the necessary resources to ensure that it is equal to the task, to ensure that it's able to do its job with thoroughness.
Given the fact that our mandate is now that we start with the Eskom debacle and then move on to Transnet and Denel, it means that a lot of resources are going to be required. A lot of experts in the field, such as forensic auditors, legal advisors, are going to be required. And we now feel that we are going to be armed and ready for our duty at hand.
We now have to be serious about our program, use the evidence leader, and ensure that the appropriate people who can assist the committee in its task are invited to the committee to give evidence.
So now we've been asking you throughout the course of the morning, do you think that this commission of inquiry will resolve the questions around state capture? We're definitely interested in your thoughts and your views on the matter, so keep them coming. We had a few coming in this morning, so please keep those tweets and comments of yours coming. We're also conducting a poll on another matter, and this one is about another really important topic. Should we change the term decolonization to Africanization? And that's what we're talking about in terms of decolonizing education. And our poll, we've got 165 votes that came in, and in that poll, some 65% say yes, the term decolonizing education should be changed to Africanization. And with that said, we go to Elvis to get more on that story.
Well, you've been commenting on this story, and we are going to look at those comments in a short while. But South Africa is, of course, rich with languages, but not all 11 official languages are being taught in our schools, let alone being made compulsory, despite the demographics of the nation. Some experts suggest that in order to transform our educational system, we need to start with the way that we communicate. So the question then is language perhaps the answer in uniting the country? Joining us in studio is the CEO of PAN South African Language Board, or PANSALB, Paul Monareng. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning to you too, and the listeners.
Now, you saw the poll that we're conducting this morning. I would like to get your thoughts on whether or not we should call it decolonization or Africanization.
I see two concepts in the way we want to redefine I'll call it the African experience and African knowledge making system. Firstly, Africa was within the colonial perspective. And the way we look at the world, the way it has been structured was to look at it from the colonial perspective. So you need to deal with that matter first. At the same time, concurrently, you need also to make sure when you deconstruct, when you decolonize, you're going to put the African experience, African knowledge, African way of life, and how we want it to be structured within the African concept. You need even to go back to the theories that are associated with Africa and how we reconstruct the theories to talk to the lives of Africa as a whole and how far it needs to go.
Well, that doesn't seem like a very small feat. It seems like an overarching feat to, in fact, perhaps scrap the entire education system for that matter.
There are tenets of the education system that we inherited that we would need. There are other aspects that are basically very, not surface, but deep structures that we need to deal with it. The conception, for example, of looking at our own languages as not important, as looking at our own language as not the language that can contribute or that can make knowledge. That is the basic aspect. We're talking about ontology, we're talking about epistemic existence of Africa and its people.
Does that then suggest that we have to start with language, which is the most important part of one's being?
Language is the core. You see, we do everything linguistically. I would say everything is mediated linguistically. So it is through language that you can do almost everything. The power relation, the ideological power play that we see currently in the country and all over the world, it's mediated linguistically. Currently, me and you are talking, we're using language, and we're influencing the nation. Basically, language does everything. You can't do. You procreate through language. You do everything through language. Talk to God through it. So basically, it is the key that we need to start, because the power dynamic and the ideological underpin and the power play are basically inherent within that. But with the development of science and development of new things of life, people are getting subtle these days, and they're using the subtlety of language to make sure that they perpetuate the old way of thinking.
Now, we know that English is a global language, but why do we still have pupils in this country, across the country, with all the different languages that we have, not being taught in a particular African language in a province?
It is very sad. It is very, very sad. Remember, the colonial or the coloniality of our existence has been that we've got one language, which is English, that is international. We do know that there's no such a thing. Any language can be given any platform, it will play. And to say that English is a language of business and science, you know that basically we are lying through our teeth, in fact, if I were to kind of put that line. It's not true. Any language, given any function, it will do. But the problem is that the coloniality that I'm talking to has inculcated that concept. It is now deep into our conscious that we think we can't do anything without speaking in English. And we think that English covers the whole world. And I think by saying what I'm saying, I'm not bashing at English because it's one of the languages too. It has been advantaged to a point that we think we can't do anything about it. So what is important is to ensure that languages, you give function, it will do. The knowledge making and even teaching in class is basically done through any language. So what is important is that we don't need to foreground concepts such as teaching, concepts such as politics and science, and say they are equivalent to English. They are not. They are concepts that can be mediated or carried out by any other language that you get in this world.
Has the lack of transformation in our education system perhaps set back a number of pupils and students in this country in terms of the use of language?
It has. It is, as I said, it is very sad that even the way we teach our own programs for teacher training, the idea is much about teaching them through a medium of instruction, basically being English. What teachers need to do, and what everybody in the teacher training business is supposed to do is, to think is, you teach people to understand. The idea is not to teach them English or to teach them Afrikaans or Sesotho. You teach them to understand. If you use any language that can help the person to conceptualize, understand what they're saying, then they can carry it in whatever language that they can learn, beyond the one that is used in the medium of instruction. So education is not equivalent to a given language. And I think if that can be placed within the center, then it's going to be very important. The other important aspect that deals with teacher training again will be the pedagogy.
Yes.
The African language teaching pedagogy, very important. We haven't looked at that. We have adopted the Western way of teaching and forgetting the ones that are inculcated within the languages that are in Africa to project what teaching is about, what learning is all about. And we foreground those mentalities. I mean, even teaching, the methodologies that teachers are being taught are basically framed from the English perspective or from the Western perspective. Again, the idea is not to talk about bashing any language. And it's not about universality as a whole, it's about pluriversality, which means the plural form. Because when you talk about universality, you're talking about things being the same, but you know that inside those things that are being the same, there's a domination of other things. People are forced to be the same. So it's much about bringing the plurality there.
We have 11 official languages. One of them, from the first indigenous people, the Khoikhoi, is not being recognized, although it's part and parcel of our national emblem. What are we doing about that as a nation, and how can we turn this around in order to make them part and parcel of where we are as a nation?
I think the key important aspect is that we have got 2 languages that have not been incorporated in the official line. 11 official languages are there, and the Constitution talks about as well as Khoi, San, and Nama language and sign languages. So you have heard previously that sign language is now in the process of being made official. So the next one that needs to follow is the Khoi San languages. But again, we need to understand that the world of South Africa does not know much about Khoi San languages. The best important approach will be to understand what is there. Because even the categorization that we've got in the Constitution is not accurate. The Khoi, San, and Nama language, Nama is one of those 2 groups. It's not on its own. So basically, we need to understand that. We had a conference in Bloemfontein as Pan-South African Language Board and called different scholars and the speakers of this speech community of the Khoi San language to come together so that all of us understand what it's all about. We came up with various information that we're still working on, seeing that we didn't understand what Khoi San language is all about, that there are various groups and various languages. Some of them are not mutually intelligible, some are mutually intelligible. Currently, the language that seems to be having a written piece or an orthography of some sort is the Nama languages, the version in South Africa, Nama languages. The orthography is in Namibia, which we have got that. We had a kind of a terminology guide that we constructed as PenSAP a long time ago that we launched last year. So what we need to do is to find out how far the language is developed and what are those languages, how many people speak these languages. So we had a meeting last week, the whole of last week in Namibia, to learn from our brothers and sisters outside on how we can deal with this matter. Going to them because they are experts. They've got these languages in their classrooms. And they've got curriculum, they've got written materials. So we need to understand what is going on there so that we can work with them instead of inventing the wheel. So together with the Northern Cape Department of Education and PenSAP, we went together to go and learn. The idea is when we have learned, we'll be able to think about how to classify the languages and prioritize which one need to be foregrounded for official status, because you can't put all of them together.
Mr. Monoreng, I thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio, sir.
Thank you very much.
That was, of course, the CEO of PanSALP, or the Pan South African Language Board, Mr. Paul Monoreng. Now, we continue this discussion after the break. You have to stay tuned.
If you ask this Irish master whiskey distiller why sometimes whiskey is spelled with an E and sometimes without, he'd say,
"Oh, to be sure. You feel so good, look. It's the whole thing. They're back and get off in the whiskey without the E."
Yeah, didn't catch that. But if you asked us the difference, we'd tell you that every whiskey from around the world is spelled without the E, except for Irish and American whiskies. Cheers. Tops at Spa. Good whiskey, good advice, no Irish accents.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the words of our sacred texts? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Now, the Department of Education is considering the reintroduction of the Nama language, or the Khoikhoi, as the Khoikhoi activists claim it should be, in the Northern Cape schools next year. The Nama language will be introduced to 2 schools and communities that are occupied by the Khoi people, which are Rimfasmak as well as Kubus in the Northern Cape. Now, in 2016, a book containing the correct spelling of words in most of the dialects of the Nama language was launched at Steinkop. Now, it's hoped that it will assist in preserving, promoting, as well as developing the language. You just also heard the conversation I had with PanSALP around these particular talks. Joining us now on the line, in fact, in our studios, in our parliamentary studios in Cape Town, on the latest developments to bring the Khoikhoi language to life, we are joined by Denver Plaikis, a Kusan language facilitator. Denver, very good morning to you and welcome.
Thank you, Elvis. That is good morning in the Khoikhoi language. And I think I want to say Kai Gankans for this opportunity to really just speak to the issues that we are facing as Khoi and San descendants in South Africa. And I just want to also just go back to a point that I think Dr. Monoreng made now when he said that there is some sort of photography. There isn't just some sort of photography in Namibia. There is a legitimate, credible document that the orthography. There's been 2 dictionaries that has been published in the Khoikhoi language, and this language can be taken up to university. You can actually do a PhD in the Khoikhoi language. And to just add some statistics, there's about 300,000 estimated mother tongue first language speakers of this language in only Namibia, and there's almost 1 million people that speak this language. So I would just like to, just from my side as a super activist, and super means to facilitate the language, that there are these statistics that are credible, you know, and it's not just some language that's just out there, you know. It can be cemented into something that's really, that can be used, that's tangible.
Now, this topography that you're talking about, you just said, Mr. Monoreng, he said that it's that part forms part and parcel of the Nama language and not Khoikhoi. Is that correct?
No. You see, the problem with calling it the Nama language in South Africa is that it's only called Nama in South Africa. And what has happened is, by calling it the Nama language, it's become a sort of a political exclusion. Because that language that's called Khoikhoi Kovab, and Khoikhoi is the people, and Kovab stands for language, that language was spoken all over South Africa where Khoikhoi groups and Khoisan groups were found. Here in the Western Cape, on the West Coast, in the Eastern Cape, in Limpopo, in the Northwest Province. Because Khoikhoi groups were found all across South Africa. And by calling it Nama, what you're actually doing is you're telling people that their languages has all but died out. And it's not. Because what was spoken was dialects, variation. And the Nama is a group, a Khoisan group that spoke the language. In the Southern Cape, which is nice in Georgia, the Outeniquas, they spoke a dialect. We have the Cape Khoi, they spoke a dialect. My mother's from Graafrenet, and there you get the Inkwas. And they also spoke a dialect of the Khoikhoi language. So to call it the Nama language is, it's very frustrating, because now it tells those of us who are still wanting and desperately wanting to reclaim our language, and it tells us that our language are like dead, you know, and it's not right. That name Nama should not be used. In Namibia, they call it the Khoikhoi Guvap language, and this is a language that's spoken by the Nama group, which is a Khoisan, the Damara, which is also a Khoisan, and the Klom groups. But there's also various Bushman groups who've also now adopted the language, because it's a language that, because their own languages have sort of really gone into extinction, that the Khoikhoi language really still connects us to our ancestors.
So just to conclude that, so Nama is one of the many dialects of the Khoikhoi Gubab, or the Khoikhoi language.
Yeah.
All right.
And you know, yeah.
Yes, continue.
And I want to say that, you know, the Nama group that ended up moving from, the Nama group started in the Cape of Good Hope. You know, where we find today the parliament is built and all of these places. The Nama groups were part of the Khoisan groups that were violently chased and hunted. You know, our crops were taken, our land was stolen, and we were literally hunted by people with guns. And all we had was bows and arrows. And we moved up, you know, Eastern Cape to the Northern Cape. And today when people talk about the Khoikhoi language being dead, it never died. This language just lived up, you know, over the Garib Dam, you know, and opposite over the Orange River, and that's where it survived, you know, as a language in Namibia. So, and I always just say that, you know, the language also, somebody told me also the other day that we shouldn't say the language died, because, you know, the Khoikhoi language survived till today in Afrikaans. Like many words in Afrikaans, like Abba, Aitsa, Khocha, Dacha, those are words that were taken from the Khoikhoi language. And you know, Elvis, I want to say that on Saturday we went to the Afrikaans event here in Paarl, and it was amazing that there's now this group that acknowledges now for the first time that Afrikaans is actually a Khoisan language. It was created by our Khoisan people, and it was actually spoken 50 years prior to the arrival of Jan van Riebeeck.
I tell you, this is very interesting news. Now, looking at the introduction, though, of the Khoikhoi Gubab, as we would now summarize it as, in the Northern Cape, how does that fill you with confidence that the language would perhaps be one of the official languages in the future?
You know, I'm partly excited, but my only concern is that until the people who want to reclaim the language are not spearheading these processes, it's going to be, again, people from the outside dictating the rules. And I think as Khoi and San people in South Africa, we have to be, you know, we have to spearhead this process. We have to be the ones that make the decisions in this. And I think it's important that it happens in the Northern Cape, but it should also be happening in the Western Cape. It should happen in the Eastern Cape. It should happen in Limpopo, in the Northwest. Because Khoi and San people were not just found in the Northern Cape. And I was reading somewhere that they were saying that the only distinguishable Khoisan group that's found today is the Namas that's in Northern Cape. And you know, and it's factually so incorrect, because Khoi and San people are still found on the Cape Flats, in Manenberg, Hanover Park, Lavendale. They're found in Saldanha Bay, in Laaiplek, you know, we are found in the Eastern Cape, Graafrenet, you know, we are found everywhere. The only problem is that our language was violently taken from us. And I think that, like rightly as Dr. Manareng said, you know, the worst thing you can do to a people, to their dignity, to our self-respect, to our sense of belonging, to our humanity, is to take away our languages. And, you know, and there's a professor in Australia that does research on what he terms linguicide. And it's a genocide of a people. And what he's received a huge grant from the Australian government to research what is now being termed language loss. And as I was coming to Cape Town on the bus, and I saw this huge billboard saying that the school violence in schools has escalated. And what this language loss is now also indicated and suggested that wherever indigenous communities like the Khoi and the San were found, in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, in South America, wherever the language was violently taken, that there was increases in extreme violent tendencies, alcohol and drug abuse increased, mental health issues. And what this profession in Australia has also now demonstrated with its research is that there's a significant impact in how indigenous communities perceive themselves. Because, you know, we're sitting with the language, Elvis, that even though as Khoi and San communities we created, this was never our language. You know, we never had a choice in saying that we're not going to speak our ancestral tongue.
So, Mr. Blakey, in closing, will the introduction of the Khoikhoi language perhaps assist the so-called coloured or the indigenous First Nation of this country in relation to their culture, their history and their language?
Absolutely, Elvis. You know, for me, language, Elvis, is the blueprint to who we are. It connects us to our ancestors. And I always believe that this language, you know, and I'm talking here now, I'm talking about the Khoikhoi language and the Ngu language, and the Ngu is even older than the Khoikhoi, that these are not just words. They transcend space and time. They are languages that were created thousands of years ago. These are languages that connect us to our ancestors. And while we are still stuck in languages that were violently put on our tongue, we will be the violent people, because our thoughts will be violent, our actions will be violent. And when you reclaim your language, you basically find out how our ancestors lived. You are able to not only reclaim the words, but the actions and the deeds and the cultural practices. And you know, you become a complete person. And in the Khoikhoi language, there's this beautiful word called kavakavas. And not kavakavas, wait, this is not, I'm just like lost now. But there's it's kavakavas, no. Okay, but I'm going to get, but it's a word that talks about restoration. Yes. And you know, and just finding yourself. And for me, that is basically what we do when we connect to our ancestral tongue. We find ourselves, we become whole people. Yes. And that is what we lack today. We are not whole people.
Mr. Blakey, I thank you so much for your time and giving us your input.
Okay, Kai Gangans, Mr. Elvis.
Kai Gangans, Denver Plakies. Yes. He's a Kusan language facilitator. Now, we also spoke with the Education Department in Northern Cape to confirm the story, which they did. But they did indicate that the deliberations are at a very sensitive stage now and will only comment after the final determination and agreements has been reached with the various Khoi groupings in relation to introducing the Khoikhoi language in the schools there. Now, they call it Nama, and you heard the activists saying that it should not be Nama, it should be either Khoikhoi Kobap. That's where we got to leave it for now at this point in time. Remember that we want you to participate in our poll. We would like to find out from you, should we decolonize our education system or should we Africanize it? That's what we're asking you. Let's take a look quickly at the numbers. The numbers suggest that we are standing right now at 165 votes, and 65% of you are saying yes, we should Africanize it instead of decolonizing our education system. Only 35% are saying no. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back after that.
I think winter is definitely one of those seasons where you can really show off your sartorial choices. You can start from a single layer of a shirt, actually starting with thermals, build it up with the shirts. You can have beautiful knits over the shirts, like we've done with Jay.
This film tells the story of a very, very significant political figure in the struggle for freedom in South Africa, who happened to be a woman. She was Nelson Mandela's wife.
The exhibition is an exploration into black femininity. Tabitha is a woman of colour, and she is exploring the historical exploitation of the black female body.
Newtown Junction Mall hosted an epic contest in the cold where 3 top South African graffiti artists battled it out for the opportunity to become the Newtown Graffiti Face-Off Master.
For your weekly dose of entertainment news, tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
Why is HIV and AIDS still a problem on the African continent in 2017? Now, one researcher spent some time with community members and ill patients in hospitals in the Democratic Republic of Congo and found that unacceptably high numbers of severely ill people only go to the hospital when they're already dying. Last year, Doctors Without Borders Hospital in Cabinda and Kinshasa treated 2,500 AIDS patients. 30% died after admission and 36% didn't survive 2 days of treatment. Joining us now in studio is Doctors Without Borders and anthropologist who compiled this report, Dr. Emily Venerables. A very good morning to you, Doctor, and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning to you.
How was your trip to the DRC? Firstly, tell us about that.
It was an incredibly difficult experience. As you mentioned in your statistics, a lot of people come into these facilities and they die within 2 days of arrival. So it's a very emotionally difficult subject for the people working there, for the people themselves and for their families.
What were you hoping to find when compiling this particular report and doing the research on it?
So really it was to answer the question, why is this happening? Anthropologists, typically we ask why. So it was looking at all these different reasons why people delay seeking healthcare and then to try and find solutions so we can stop them coming in so late in the future.
And what did you find?
I wish there was one answer, but it was actually very, very complex. I found this kind of combination of individual factors, community factors, and also healthcare level factors. Stigma was a huge issue for individuals. They received a lot of stigmatization from their families and from their communities. Money is also an issue for people. It costs money either to get to the healthcare facility or to pay for tests to find out that you're HIV positive. And then also at the community level, religion was a factor. People have very, very strong religious beliefs, and in some cases, these were actually preventing people from coming into facilities or from taking their treatment.
Can you elaborate on the stigma still associated with HIV and AIDS, and why do we still have the stigma in 2017 where everybody's supposed to know about AIDS and HIV?
Yeah. In Kinshasa, in Democratic Republic of Congo, it's very different from here. I noticed a lot of the stigma was because HIV is still, for people, it's still associated with death. People think if I get HIV, around it, and we need to do a lot more to inform people about medication so that they realize, you know, they can live a long, normal life with HIV just through taking treatment.
What about medication? We were told that, or in fact, we saw in your report that pastors were telling people to even throw their medication away. What is that all about?
I know, and I have to say it's not all pastors, it's certain churches who are offering people an alternative. And it's very, very difficult because, you know, obviously we respect people's religious beliefs and religion can provide people with a lot of support. But at the same time, some of these pastors are giving people very dangerous messages, and instead of coming into a healthcare facility, whether MSF's or another one, they're going to church camps or they're receiving alternative means of treatment from their pastors and their churches.
How are you as MSF assisting and ensuring that people actually get treatment before they get to that dying minute?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And in Kinshasa, as well as in other projects that we run, we work a lot with communities. It's always important that our work is located within communities. So taking HIV testing nearer to people, talking about HIV, ensuring people know where to go, and also training and mentoring healthcare staff so that doctors and nurses can recognize the signs of HIV earlier before it gets too late.
This observation that you've done in DRC, is this an African trend, do you think, or do you suspect that this might be taking place on other countries on the African continent?
I can only talk for the countries where MSF works and where they've done similar work, but definitely we're seeing similar trends in Kenya and Malawi at the moment, where people are waiting until this very, very late stage, and then it becomes more difficult to help them.
Well, what is the message that you would like to get out to people living with HIV and AIDS?
Thinking about Kinshasa, it's really that if you come to a facility and become tested, there's no shame in it. Then there is treatment that can help people live a long, normal life. HIV in 2017 does not have to equal death.
Some of your recommendations in the report?
I think, again, stressing the community element, to really work with communities, to talk about HIV, to work with local pastors and churches to open up this dialogue and, you know, take advantage of the strong influence that pastors have and the trust people have in them to talk about HIV.
Doctor, thank you so much for coming through and joining us here in studio.
Thank you so much.
That was, of course, all the way from the DRC. She was there for a couple of weeks compiling this report and, of course, giving us an indication there. Doctors Without Borders anthropologist, Dr. Emily Venables. We'll take a short break, and Kendall is next with your sports news.
A very good morning to you. In fact, we're not going to take a short break. We're going to get right into it. We're just ready to bring you all of the best news from the weekend. And we start off with the inimitable Caster Semenya, who just cannot stop winning. And once again, she left her opponents in her dust when she totally dominated at the World Challenge in Berlin. Semenya shattered the world best in the women's 600-meter event in a runaway victory of the Little Run event. The world and Olympic 800-meter champion charged ahead at the gun and left the rest of the field behind, with even pace setter Ilona Usovic of Belarus unable to keep up, as the South African star stormed home in 1 minute 21.77 seconds. She took 0.86 off the previous long-standing global mark, which had been held by Cuba's Ana Quirot for more than 20 years. Semenya, the only South African athlete participating at the meet, also smashed her own national best of 1 minute 25.56 seconds, which had set in Turku in June 2012. Cape Town City are making new coach Benny McCarthy a happy man. The club takes a 1-0 advantage into the second leg of the MTN 8 semi-final against Bidvest Wits. Ayanda Patosi's first half goal separated the two sides in the first leg that was played at the Cape Town Stadium.
It was an evenly balanced first half. However, little chances were created by the two teams. Wits took fewer shots at goal than the home team. In fact, the only clear chance came in the 20th minute, with Tabang Monare forcing a save from man of the match Shoaib Walters. The defending champions had less possession of the ball later in the half. They played far less in the opposition's half, and City used the opportunity to pile some pressure. It resulted in a late goal, a minute before the break. Confusion from the Wits defenders gifted Patosi with a close-range goal. The Vistas should have equalized immediately after. Sivako Damjanovic, who was part of the mess that led to his team conceding a goal, didn't do himself any justice moments later. He cleared the ball off the goal line of the opposition post following a free kick from Dalen Klaassen. Wits dominated play in the second half, but once again, they didn't do enough to threaten Walters, as City was able to absorb the pressure. It was City's fourth win of the season after 4 matches. Levan Tube, SABC News.
Well, news coming out of the weekend about Rivaldo Coetzee is that his move to Celtic has been scrapped. He didn't pass his medical. He failed the medical that would have led him to moving to Scottish club Celtic for a reported €1 million transfer. It remains to be seen what will come of that move, whether it's been totally cancelled and it's not going to happen again, or whether he still has another shot at it at a later stage. Now, talking about British football, we go to the EPL, where Liverpool dismantled Arsenal in a 4-0 humiliation at Anfield, and both Chelsea and Manchester United were imperious in their dispatching of their respective opponents over the weekend. Let's take a look at some of those glorious goals.
Bellerin was last man for Arsenal. Salah has half the field to himself. Mane's joining him. Salah won't want him. Salah will score. Liverpool 3, Arsenal 0. Salah one way, Sturridge the other. Salah. Sturridge! Welcome to the party. goals wherever you look in the Liverpool side, from the beginning and from the bench. 4-4 against Arsenal.
Such a good strike of the ball. It's Morata. And it's poked into the corner exquisitely and expertly by Cesc Fabregas. And moments after a fairly dreadful corner, he comes up with the opening goal. Well, I've seen Manchester United's open 2 games, saw them demolish West Ham and Swansea. Gay was caught in possession there. It's Conte, referee could have blown. When Moses went over on the edge of the box, as Khoikhoi. Morata makes it 2.
Qatarian takes by arrives and United finally have their lead, courtesy of Marcus Rashford. Instinctive, firm, penetrative, United well. Lingard is onside. And Fellaini is on hand to twitch it in, and Manchester United's points are thereby surely safe. And yet again, a red-shirted substitute has delivered. Indeed, 2 of them.
What a weekend of fantastic sports and beautiful goals. Talking about people that scored goals, these 2, Conor McGregor and Money Mayweather. Because Money Mayweather scored a 10th round technical knockout of MMA and UFC champion Conor McGregor to cement his legacy as an all-time boxing great. Now, this fight sends their 40-year-old into his 2nd retirement, but with an unblemished 50-0 record to surpass heavyweight legend Rocky Marciano's 49-0 mark for most wins without a loss or a draw.
Referee Robert Bird made certain both Mayweather and McGregor knew and understood the rules, with the UFC champion making his professional boxing debut. And with the formalities out of the way, it was finally time for action after weeks of talking by both fighters as they hyped the fight. The fight lived up to expectations, with the Irishman looking to score an early knockout as it promised. But Mayweather left few openings as he used the first 3 rounds to fill out his opponent. Once he had studied McGregor's technique, Mayweather took complete control of the contest by the 4th round. Mayweather made good on his promise of an early finish to the 12th round contest. In the 10th round, he pinned a visibly fatigued McGregor on the ropes and hammered the Irishman before the referee stepped in to stop the bout.
He's a tough competitor, and I think we gave the fans what they wanted to see. Our game plan was to take our time, go to him, let him shoot all his heavy shots early, and then take him out at the end, down the stretch.
He was a lot more composed under the shots. He was a lot more experienced, especially in the later part of it. But early on, I felt like it was handy enough, to be honest.
Mayweather will reportedly earn a minimum of $180 million, placing him among the world's highest paid athletes like Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan. McGregor became the best paid debutant of all time, netting a $30 million purse plus a share of ticket sales, pay-per-view and merchandising revenues. Pesinkato, SABC News.
Now, those 2 are smiling all the way to the bank. In fact, I'd be saying they're laughing all the way to their respective boxing and bank vaults. 2 tweets to just close off the show. You've got lots to say about this particular fight. There was lots happening over the weekend on social media. First up, Onuka Christian says, yeah, the money man won. Boxing has not been this sweet since the exit of Mike Tyson. Yes, Iron Mike Tyson, he really was one of the last massive champions in the world of boxing. One last tweet before we hand over to top of the hour. And the great says, Mayweather paid off his last 2 fights just to overwrite a record that has stood the test of time. Yes, it is unfortunate that Money Mayweather had to do it against a fighter who's not really a boxer, but you know what? He got it. 50-0, trademarked it a couple of months ago. It belongs to Money Mayweather. That's where we're going to leave it. We'll be back at the top of the hour. Make sure you stay close. You have been watching Newsroom.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it the advice of our elders? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
One of the many plus points of this magical country must be its proximity to South Africa. We went on a road trip to the magnificent Maputo. But this time, not just to relax, but to actually drop a very personalized invitation to the people of Mozambique to come and visit our beautiful country. With its beautiful scenery and weather, the city of Maputo was more than welcoming. A team of trendy influencers in fashion, the trending craft markets, lifestyle and adventure brought their A game. The aim of this activation was to promote Gauteng as the leading tourist destination in Southern Africa with its buzzing streets, its rich heritage and the vibrant urban lifestyle. Not only that, but this activation was also to strengthen relationships within the two countries, encouraging brand leaders to exchange ideas and maybe join forces. Young entrepreneurs from townships like Soweto seek to encourage people to visit the townships and to also have a different experience as to what is the norm, and thus change the perspective of township tourism. Soweto Outdoor Adventures does just that.
The Gauteng Tourism Agency operates within a broader strategy of marketing and promoting Gauteng. And key to that is that we've got different source markets that we want to see a number of footfall into Gauteng. And Maputo is one of our focus areas in terms of the numbers that we want to see flowing more into Gauteng. So it's a core market that we would like to activate and ensure that we showcase to the Maputo people or Mozambique people at large about the offerings that are there in Gauteng. As you know, in Gauteng, we have now a township enterprise revitalization strategy that has been launched in terms of showcasing what is there in the townships. So different enterprises that we have brought with us here today are mainly people who originate and operate from the townships, who can showcase what people who come into Johannesburg can do beyond going to Sandton, beyond going into Tshwane, or beyond going into Ekurhuleni main cities. But there are activities and programs that they can do. We want to grow more numbers. We want to generate also content that we would like to show to people of Maputo. There is a lot of numbers of business people that comes into Gauteng to buy. Almost 90% of goods that come from here are from Johannesburg. But when they come and buy, they also have activities to do. So we want to make sure that they combine their business with tourism activities, and we would like to show them that there are affordable places to go to, there are affordable activities that you can do when you're in Gauteng. Africa is the market that must know itself. As we do the famous campaign which used to be called Short Left, we're showcasing what is available in our country. But we need to broaden to make sure that South Africans know Africa, but Africans also, when they come into Gauteng, they must not just know the streets of Johannesburg only, but we want them to know broader activities that are there. The teams that we brought around here, that I saw around here, are really an interesting element of SMME development, as well as the core part of what we want to do about the transformation of the economy, that you need to showcase and make people have market access. These people that we bring in here, they will be explaining to people in Maputo about what they do, what they offer, at what price, and there is nothing better than a person who sells speaking directly to the customers.
Hello and a warm welcome to PM News, and we're broadcasting live from Johannesburg.
4 decades later, the family is still seeking closure.
We need the truth, and the truth must be told.
Children often go undiagnosed because they are hidden away. About 1 million people in South Africa live with autism.
Creative recycling at play.
Mosaic has been around forever. I just had to find a new, fresh way to put and a new spin to put on it. So I decided, why not recycled cans?
Stay tuned to PM News for all your news updates every Saturday and Sunday from 1500 hours.
It's 1100 hours Central Africa time here on this Monday, the 28th of August. Jumbo Africa, and a warm welcome to the final hour. Kendall?
It's really good to be in this final hour. It's a Monday morning that had lots of action over the weekend, but lots to cover in terms of news for today.
Lots of news, but of course the focus this morning is on decolonizing our education system, and we're focusing on that. We're conducting a poll, and we're asking the question, do you think that we should change the term decolonizing education to Africanization?
That's how we bring you to this age-old conversation that we've been having in South Africa with regards to our education systems, where we've got 183 votes that have come in on this poll. And of those votes, 66% say yes, we should change the term decolonizing education to Africanization.
Only 34% are suggesting no, but let's take a look at what you are telling us on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Sabelo says, yes, because Africanization talks about us and where we are going as Africans. Write our own curriculum that speaks about us.
That's right, reorientate our own thinking to make it about us. Khoikhoi says, this has nothing to do with the term. Education only needs improvement, not new terms, because it will be a waste of money.
Lots of terms we had this morning as well, but you can let us know what's on your mind. On our question of the day, we focus on Parliament's portfolio committee that finally got some teeth to investigate state capture.
It's about time too, so we want to get you involved in this one as well and want to find out from you, what are your thoughts on the matter? Do you think the Commission of Inquiry will resolve the questions around state capture?
It's a big question. So let me take a look at what you're telling us. Gudani says that Commission of Inquiry is going to pull a fast one on us. Watch all members of Zuma Africa. They will not be implicated at all.
There's someone with not much faith in that process. EFF says, well, I love EFF, says, I don't think so. It's a waste of time.
So says the Sundown. Please Let me know what's on your mind and let us know, and we'll read your comments a little bit later. But we're also focusing on the big money fight this weekend. There was lots of cash being strewn around, so to speak. Kendall, what came out of that?
That's why they called it the money fight. So much money was made over the weekend by these two men and their respective teams that it's not even funny. But we want to find out from you, those that woke up at 2 in the morning to catch a fight that only started at 6 in the morning, that tweeted the entire money fight affect you? What do you make of it?
Was it a fight or a farce? Let me take a look at what you are telling us on the Twitter handle. Kendall?
Khoikhoi comes in with, personally, I expected more action, more fun, moments of brilliance, more crowd entertainment, like dribbling in football. Money Mayweather.
Nazim Grootboom says, congratulations to Floyd Mayweather. He really gave us a good fight with that MMA superstar, McGregor. So there you have it. Keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But right now, it's time to take a look at your news headlines. The body of a third miner has been brought to the surface at Harmony Gold's Kusaletu mine in Carltonville and Gauteng's far west rand. A full bench of the Cape Town High Court is hearing an application by the Women's Legal Centre today pertaining to recognition of Muslim marriages and the rights of Muslim women. And sparks are expected to fly today when the SACP meets the ANC's top 6 at a bilateral meeting. Now those are all your highlights, but before we get there, let's find out from Kendall what's happening in the sports front.
Thank you very much, Elvis. Good morning to you. Before I bring you the sports, let's bring you exactly what's happening here. Now, this is what we've got for you in the sports today. By Marcina, you touch for Pagasa, it's 1-0! The students becomes the master as Benny McCarthy's Cape Town City makes it 2 out of 2 in all competitions this season against former coach Gavin Hunt's Bidvest, winning 1-0 in their latest encounter.
Firmino. Sadio Mane. Mane! Oh, wow!
Four-star Liverpool turns on the stars as it dishes out a 4-0 thump into Arsenal at Anfield in the Gunners' worst performance in recent times.
Floyd Mayweather has McGregor on the run, a shot, left hook, another hook, and it's over. Robert Berg says it's over.
A ruthless and clinical Floyd Mayweather finally earns his coveted 50-0 mantle as he scores a 10th round TKO over UFC champion Conor McGregor in the most highly anticipated boxing match this year. Now, all these in more detail I'll be bringing to you at about 11:35 or so. But for now, let's start with the main news of the day. Protesters have set alight at Rea Vaya bus station and blocked roads with burning tyres and rocks near Rivoli, Johannesburg today. Johannesburg Metro Police Department spokesperson Chief Superintendent Wayne Minnaar said that Main Reef and Commander roads were barricaded with burning tyres and rocks. Minnaar says the protesters earlier had hurled rocks and stones at passing motorists. He said that a group of around 100 people from the Zamimpilo informal settlement near Rivoli began protesting around 4 in the morning. Minnaar said they were protesting over housing. He said the protest was affecting traffic from Roodepoort and New Kanda Road in Soweto. No arrests have been made yet. And emergency services teams deployed to the Harmony Gold Mine in Carltonville say the chances of survival for the remaining 2 trapped miners are slim, but not all hope is lost. With 3 bodies already brought to the surface, the conditions underground are not conducive and therefore making it hard to predict if the remaining miners are still alive. The incident follows seismic activity on Friday morning, which resulted in ground collapsing beneath the surface at the mine on Gauteng's West Rand. Mine officials say rescue teams have been working throughout the night. Conditions remain treacherous, making recovery efforts difficult. The mine company says it's providing counseling to the families who have lost their loved ones. It will also assist with burial costs. The union AMCU says it will hold the mine responsible for the deaths. And in other news, a full bench of the Cape Town High Court is hearing an application by the Women's Legal Centre today pertaining to recognition of Muslim marriages and rights of Muslim women. The matter has been set down for 2 weeks. 3 judges have been appointed to hear the matter. According to the Non-Profit Law Centre, legal steps to ensure fairness between the spouses, as well as ensuring children's rights when civil or customary marriages break down, do not exist in Muslim and religious marriages. The centre argues that there's no judicial oversight with Muslim divorces, as there is in civil and customary divorces. It will rely on arguments that a range of constitutional rights are being violated, including the right to equality. And a manhunt is underway for a gunman who opened fire at the Hillbrow Theatre, killing 1 person and injuring 7 others yesterday morning. Now, the incident happened during a live concert as a band was on stage when the man suddenly jumped on stage and began shooting, demanding to have his cell phone back. Police say when the audience tried to intervene, the gunman fired shots at random. Police say 8 people were shot, 1 of whom has died. Several others were rushed to hospital. And sparks are expected to fly when the SACP, led by Bladen Nzimande, meets the ANC's top 6, led by President Jacob Zuma, at a bilateral meeting today. Earlier this year, the SACP called on President Zuma to resign and barred him from speaking at any of its fora. The communists have also expressed disappointment at delays in instituting a judicial commission of inquiry into the capture of state. The SACP says the avalanche of emails exposing the corruption of the Guptas and their influence on SOEs makes the need for a commission of inquiry urgent. Selective disciplinary action against some members of parliament, like Dr. Makosi Khoza, over their siding with the opposition parties in the recent motion of no confidence against Zuma, was also criticized by the SACP. Now, speaking to the SABC this morning, SACP First Deputy General Secretary Solima Paila touched on today's meeting with the ANC.
It's the first time we're meeting since our call for President Zuma to step. But in the main, we're taking forward the decision of our Congress that said we must participate in the coming elections, and that conditionalities were put in that regard, including engagement with our allies, in particular the ANC. Therefore, we'll put in the main the question of the reconfiguration of the alliance at the core of our discussions, because that's one of the major considerations for how we take a decision going forward. And we need to report to our structures in December on this matter. That's why when we have called for the Alliance Political Council, which the ANC had postponed, we realized that waiting for that, which the ANC is not prepared to convene at this moment, we rather convene this urgent bilateral so that we are able to share with them these concerns, and all of us take collective responsibility for the wider complications and consequences for this decision to our revolution and to our being a political party or political movement that is in power.
Now, the Hawks and the NPA should investigate those implicated in the leaked Gupta emails. That, at least, is according to NC Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, who was speaking at a COSATU rally in Seshego, Limpopo yesterday. He said those implicated in corrupt activities must be prosecuted. The NC presidential hopeful says some within the government are on a looting spree and should be dealt with. The ANC's Women's League in Limpopo has also voiced their support for Ramaphosa ahead of the December conference. Ramaphosa also cautioned members not to buy votes in the upcoming ANC elective conference in December. He says those choosing leaders must be influenced by the interests of the ANC.
As you exercise your choice on policy positions, on leadership positions, you must only be influenced by one thing, and one thing only: the interests of the African National Congress. It must only be the interests of the ANC that will influence you. You must not allow money to influence you. You must not allow people who will want to confuse you. You must just be guided by the values, the policies, and the principles of the African National Congress.
There's another leader putting the interests of the ANC ahead of everything else. Now, meanwhile, Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises has now been empowered to investigate state capture. The legislature has approved additional resources for the inquiry. Despite this, it's unclear when the inquiry will officially get underway. Earlier this month, members of Parliament were told the cost of a probe would be exorbitant and that Parliament was unable to provide the services of an evidence leader. Barely 2 weeks ago, the Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises was also buckling under pressure to deliver on its oversight mandate. It sent a three-party delegation to appeal for more resources as they seek to get to the bottom of state capture. Mthutuzela Vanara, who led the evidence in the parliamentary inquiry into the SABC board, has been seconded to lead this inquiry.
The complexity of the task, as well as the challenging nature of probing allegation of state capture through government parastatals, it is appropriate and necessary that this committee should be allocated the necessary resources to ensure that it is equal to the task, to ensure that it's able to do its job with thoroughness.
Given the fact that our mandate is now that we start with the Eskom debacle and then move on to Transnet and Denel, it means that a lot of resources are going to be required. A lot of experts in the field, such as forensic auditors, legal advisors, are going to be required. And we now feel that we are going to be armed and ready for our duty at hand.
We now have to be serious about our program, use the evidence leader, and ensure that the appropriate people who can assist the committee in its task are invited to the committee to give evidence.
And so to bring you in on this conversation, we're asking you today, will the Commission of Inquiry resolve the question around state capture? Now, I've had quite a few comments from you over the course of the morning, and let's see if we can bring you one or two of those to share with the rest of our viewers. First up, we've got one coming up from proudly Khoikhoi, who says state capture probe must be extended to prior to 1994 so that we can understand how the state has really been captured by the colonialists before we talk about the Guptas. That's proudly Khoikhoi. Jablan Nzilane says no amount of investigations on all forms of state corruption and state capture will take place. That is until a new government takes over. Now, of course, I'll keep taking tally of all those comments and views on that particular matter. But in the meantime, let's bring you another story about how many women can rely on police to apprehend their abusers. One woman's fight for justice has exposed their incompetence. Gillian Pillay tells her story.
Women abuse, a recurring narrative. No exception in the month dedicated to women. It's not the first time this woman's friend has endured a brutal beating, but this attack, more severe.
He pulled her by the hair, threw her against the wall. She had strangle marks around her neck. He sat on her ribcage and held her down so she couldn't shout out.
She finally mustered the courage to report her partner, but bumbling police officers kept referring her to different stations. Even at the third one, she did not succeed. The Domestic Violence Act states that when a complainant wants to open a case, police officers are obliged to take a statement. At this police station, due procedure was not followed. Instead, the woman was persuaded to seek marriage counselling.
She said to me the lady policewoman who had helped her had phoned her husband and he is coming there so they could discuss to see if they could work things out.
Police conceded.
This incident is a concern to the police. We are going to look at it. We'll make sure that that officer who negotiated with the victim's husband is taken to task.
Statistics show that 3 women are killed daily due to domestic violence.
Our police officers need to be sensitized about that woman that comes to you and you're not giving them a J8, you're not opening a case for them, they might not come back alive tomorrow.
Many victims of abuse continue to endure. Gillian Pillay, SABC News, Johannesburg.
He's still going. He pops it up with Sergio Peterson. Easy as that. What a response it is from the Cheetahs. Brilliant score.
Imran Tahir produced a superb performance with the ball. The Proteas leg spinner put his side in the driving seat, scalping 3 wickets for just 18 runs.
Gifton Gope is flying toward third, and he is there with a triple, his first in the big leagues.
It is
is a Ferrari front row lockout unless Hamilton can get on pole, and he can't. Ferrari, for the first time since France in 2008, have locked out the front row.
For all your sports news, keep it locked to Sports Live every Saturday and Sunday from 20:30.
South Africa's poverty trends recently revealed that more than half of the population are living in poverty and are struggling to live above the breadline. Naturally, this would suggest a rise in debt as credit becomes a means to survive. However, the latest Consumer Index report by TransUnion suggests that there's actually improvement in the area. Now, to tell us more, joining us in studio is the CEO of TransUnion Africa, Mr. Lee Naik. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Talk to us about the consumer credit increase that climbed from 53.8 points to the second quarter, in the second quarter, from 50.8 points in the first quarter. Is that a good improvement, and how does it correlate with the poverty trends that we see in the country?
Well, it's quite an interesting stat to think about to start with. It's important to know that the CCI index talks about the consumer's credit behavior versus those of the retailers or the lenders in itself. So what it's seeking to identify over a quarter-on-quarter period is how did consumers behave from a credit perspective. And what we found, in fact, for 6 straight quarters is the index actually stabilizing and now improving over the last 2 quarters. And ultimately what it tells us is that as part of the more tighter fiscal environment we're part of, that lenders actually make it much harder for consumers to access finance, and consumers themselves are being a lot more careful as to how they take on new debt.
So what might be the cause of this? Is it because we're in a technical recession, we have a downgrade in the country? Is that part and parcel of it, or is it just consumer behavior?
Well, it's a variety of factors. I think one, we are part of a technical recession. Secondly, the National Credit Act, which has been in place for quite a while, has made it tougher for lenders to hand over a facility to a consumer in these kind of conditions. And what you find is that it's actually quite hard for consumers to have access to the same finance. And then finally, consumers are becoming aware that it's difficult to actually participate in this credit economy, and they're starting to deleverage, implying that they're saving for those more luxury purchases and actually moving more to what can I afford given the poverty situation in the land right now.
Does this perhaps, the strict regulations that we see for people that can't have access to credit now, does that give rise to people to go to dodgy lenders perhaps, like they call them loan sharks?
Well, the rise of machinistas or loan sharks, as you said, is something that's been there for quite a while. What is interesting over the last year, we've seen that the top 4 banks have enjoyed a smaller share of the active credit market, and the smaller and the more emerging banks, as well as the microfinanciers, are starting to pick up some of that. So it is actually bad for the entire lending ecosystem if some of our consumers are picking up high interest loans from the loan sharks. So it's starting to happen, specifically in the lower end of our population.
So if there's an improvement in behavior by consumers, how does it affect business?
Well, a few things. I think it's important to note what it is that's actually improving. On one hand, we've seen that the credit defaults that consumers have is starting to reduce year on year, as much as 7% on a year-on-year basis. And what it tells us is that consumers are taking on less new debt, and when they do take on new debt, they're actually being a lot more careful about their payment behavior. So they're actually paying their debts on time. In terms of the broader credit economy, we found that the retailers, specifically ShopRite Checkers, announced some really good results amongst tough times for the retailers most recently. So the challenge right now for retailers is how do you win over those very few customers that can afford to take credit from you? And given the choices they now have in a commoditized market, how do you keep them sticky to you, to your brand, and how do you offer them more value for money more than ever before?
The outlook for the remainder of 2017 and 2018, what does it look like?
Well, on the back end of this year, I guess most speculators will start to talk about a few more interest rate cuts, and that will start to free up, I think, a bit more disposable income, and hopefully that will start to give rise to a better economic spending level from our consumers. So hopefully some relief for the economy in the back end of the year going into 2018. But what I can tell you is that we've got to keep the levels of carefulness that we've had over the last 2 quarters. I don't think that the lenders will relent. They will keep being as tough as they need to be, because that's where we are from an economy perspective. So hard to call, but it looks good going into the back end of the year.
What is your advice for consumers out there when they enter into credit agreements and how to behave when they're in that agreement?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that credit's quite an important thing. It seems so easy to access, but once you have it, it's actually something you need to respect with the greatest levels of both transparency, but also just in terms of how you take on more debt. What I would say to consumers is that we find that as a large credit bureau in South Africa, we have over 24 million credit active customers in the country. We find that only 500,000 to 600,000 of them access their free credit reports every year. So if you are taking on credit, you want to know what credit you have against your name, not just only because of your credit, but there could be fraudulent activity happening that creates extra accounts or additional accounts that you may not be aware of. So what I would say to these consumers is start to be aware of your credit habits, pay off those debts of the highest interest, and where possible, save rather than take on new credit for your luxury purchases or purchases that you can hold on to for a few more months.
Why is a credit-free record so important?
Well, not so much a credit-free record. A healthy record allows you to access finances. In an economy where it's tough to get hold of disposable income, you want to tap into the credit economy to allow you to make those purchases, whether it's to buy a new car or to buy a house or to buy something as basic as furniture that you may need. So having a good credit record allows the lenders to decide whether to extend that credit to you. What TransUnion does, Elvis, is allows us to help these banks and other lenders decide whether you're worthy of that same finance. Having a bad mark against your name, whether it be a default or a judgment, prevents those banks from easily extending finance to you.
Those that don't know about their credit score, how do they get in touch with TransUnion to check out and get their free record?
Well, there's quite a few ways to do it. You can go to transunion.co.za is the easiest way, or you can call our contact center 0861 461 461.
And it's absolutely free. You don't have to spend any money.
It's free once a year, absolutely. So you should definitely take us up on the offer.
Yes. Mr. Naika, thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio.
Thank you.
That was Lee Naik. He's the CEO of TransUnion Africa. So you can get your free report. Do you know that? If you don't know, well, now you know. Go and get it. TransUnion.co.za. There you go. We'll take a short break. We'll be back with your sports news after that.
Africa is constantly getting new technologies, and with that comes new terms.
Massive, open, online university. And primarily what they are doing is they're established in the community, so they're well established within the Soweto community.
Internet of Things also covers small sensors, so you can do like home security, motion detectors, IP cameras.
Our network simplifies these terms for you. We also have new gadgets and social media.
When it falls on the grounds and then the battery, everything falls off, people just put it all together and then your phone is back in shape.
The Volega app, we initially started off by doing this manually.
The internet is actually my favorite fashion invention of all time.
That's Network with Ms. Pumelele Zondi every Sunday at 9 p.m. on SABC News.
The call for decolonizing education is not a new one. According to some experts, this is a conversation that has been taking place since the 1950s and 60s in the context of decolonizing the struggle against colonial rule. Now, it first emerged as an idea for an all-inclusive education system. However, with this issue being brought up more aggressively in the past year, what active changes have taken place since the onset of democracy, and what can we expect to be done within the next year? Joining us now in studio is the Department of Education spokesperson, Elijah Mhlanga. Mr. Mhlanga, very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Morning, thank you.
Now, we ask our viewers the question of whether or not it should still be decolonization or Africanization. Your thoughts on that?
That's an interesting question, but I think decolonization tells you where you come from. Africanization tells you where you're going. So I think they can both work. It's the content of what you're trying to do that really matters.
Now, if we look at decolonization, what does it actually mean, though? Because some people have got different perspectives in terms of what decolonization actually means.
Well, even academics themselves, they have different explanations of that. They throw all sorts of ideas about what it could mean. But what we believe it means is that we need to move away from what the colonialists have imposed on us when they came to Africa and brought with them certain concepts that we needed to use as part of our lives. And all of those things manifested themselves across different spheres of life, whether it's science, or whether it's education, or whether it's history, or mathematics, even the English language, and how we view the world. And we believe that it's about time that we find a new way of looking at it, because in that process of colonization, there was a process of denigrating what we had as Africans originally. And we started to look down upon our own ways of thinking and our own knowledge systems in favor of what the colonialists had brought to us.
Does it suggest that we change our curriculum, that we change our textbook, that we change our history altogether, or is there certain parts of it that need to be configured altogether?
It means change will have to happen because what we have now, for example, they say that some of the disciplines that we have right now, whether it's engineering or whether it's accounting or whatever, those things are historical. They were created because you were trying to solve a particular problem that existed at the time. What is it that we have in Africa today that is peculiar only to the continent that we can do? Can we create our own industries that can solve our own problems? Those are the things that make the change to be unavoidable, because we need to look at our own circumstances and say, what is it that we need to do? That's why people always say that you cannot import solutions to an environment where they might not work. We need to find African solutions to African problems. So that's what we are talking about. So definitely the curriculum material that we use in our schools will have to change, and the way we teach, the terminologies and concepts that we use will also have to change to reflect our own indigenous knowledge systems.
Let's take a look at our education system currently. What was done since the onset of democracy and the changes that has transpired over the years to make sure that we get to that point where we can decolonize ourselves?
Well, it's a process. You know, when we experienced democracy in '94, there were changes that took place in '95. There were discussions about the curriculum that the country should adopt and what is it that matters to us. And you will know that since then there have been various changes that have taken place. It's a process, it's going to be a long process, but we believe we are getting there. If you look at the Constitution, we align ourselves with what the Constitution has to say. Schools Act, same way, but in that process we have to also infuse the appropriate curriculum that will ensure that our learners obtain the necessary skills that will prepare them for this new world that we are talking about. But also in the past 5 years, there are specific things that we have been doing to try revise our education system, talk about the introduction of African languages in our schools. We realized that there were schools that were not offering any African language whatsoever. So you can't talk about decolonization if there are still schools that are not offering any indigenous African language whatsoever. That's why now we are forcing those schools to do that. And there were about 3,500. The number has come down now because they've been rolling out that implementation. But we've also had the minister setting up ministerial task teams to look at mathematics in our schools. What is it? How are we teaching it? And what can we do? There's currently another task team now looking into our textbooks. What material is there? Is there discrimination? What else is there that is missing that is African in its approach that we need to make sure that we give it prominence? So there have been various things that we've been doing to try strengthen our curriculum, making sure that it is aligned to our own dynamics in South Africa and in Africa broadly.
When we talk about language, are we talking about incorporating all languages in all the different schools, or will it be per province of a particular language set that will be used?
It's per province, because remember, for example, in KZN, isiZulu is a dominant language, so you can't impose Sesotho there if you cannot find teachers in that province to teach in that language, so to teach that language. So we are saying school governing bodies, parents need to make that decision, choose a language which they prefer in the school based on the numbers or other dynamics that might be suitable for their circumstances. But we want an indigenous African language, particularly those that are official, to be included in the curriculum of all our schools in South Africa as part and parcel of moving forward in this Africanization process that you spoke about. Talking about official languages, we have 11 of them. One of the minority groups, the Khoikhoi and the San, they are suggesting that their language is part and parcel of the national emblem. And yet, the Khoikhoi language, or the Khoikhoi Khubab, is marginalized. They are not being official, they've not been made official, and of course the language is struggling to get to all the people that's supposed to speak that language. It's a fair criticism, it's a fair comment, it's a fair concern. I think as government we need to take that into consideration. We've been engaging with that community for some time now. I know that even the Pan-African Language Board has also spoken to us about that language, particularly in the Northern Cape, asking us what is it that we are going to do, because we really need to accommodate all languages, especially those that have a historical significance in our country. We need to make sure that those are brought on board as well, and not give priority to languages that only came to Africa much later. So we need to make sure, because some of our languages are dying, by the way. Yes. And we need to make sure that we protect them and do all that is possible to make sure that they stay in the school environment and are protected. We have writers who will create material that will stay, and people must read it and use it, because the other challenge is that parents in the homes these days, they prefer to speak English with their children, and that's a challenge. You need to be decolonized at home first. We need to decolonize the mind. We need to change the mindset and say, speak your own language. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Some parents will say, no, but where am I going to use this in the workplace? It is very important. Those that speak and use these languages, they have more opportunities of generating an income than other people who cannot in many other spheres, even in the workplace. So we need to make sure that we do everything that we can as a government, as a society, to make sure that our languages are protected and promoted. A court recently ruled that it shouldn't just be Christianity to be taught in schools. Is that perhaps the start of decolonizing our education system? It's part and parcel of that, but that particular provision was always there in the Schools Act. We always say that all religions need to be treated in the same way. None should be promoted above the other. So what the court did was to really emphasize what the Schools Act was already saying. And we appreciate that, because there was beginning to be unequal treatment when it comes to religion and observances in school. So we are saying your religion should be able to find space and expression in a school environment without you feeling like you're unwanted or unwelcome in a school. So those that feel they need to practice certain religious observances shouldn't infringe on the rights of those that do not want to participate at that particular time. In closing, we start off by asking you the question whether it should be Africanized or whether it should be decolonized. So you suggest there must be a hybrid. So it could be, and I've written it down here, Africolonization. I don't know about that. Mr. Mhlanga, I thank you so much for joining us here in studio. There you have it. That was the Department of Education spokesperson, Elijah Mhlanga.
Entrepreneurship and taking charge of your own destiny is a mindset, and it's something that should start at a very young age.
I started when I was around about 3 or something, because I have a bunch of paintings in the office. I have a teacher that teaches me and my class how to do business, and he was the one who taught me.
Being an entrepreneur makes you money-wise.
Before everyone spent their money, I would sell the little things I painted, and I'd sell my drawings and stuff like that.
In business, it is important to keep record of all your transactions.
I have a passion and I love making anything, so I chose to make Play-Doh and I'm passionate about it.
Catch Bophelong every Friday at 17:30.
Welcome back. Time for the sports. My name is Kendall Makamate, and on this Monday morning, we'll start off with a story about how all Premier Soccer League activity will take a back seat for the next 2 weeks, with some players swapping their club jerseys for national team colours. Going into this break, some teams, especially Maritzburg United and Cape Town City FC, have been a marvel to watch as they hit the ground running at the start of the new season.
Can they continue in that fine run? That is the big question.
Did the break come too early for the teams that seem to be on form? Under the stewardship of novice coaches, Maritzburg United and Cape Town City have been the talk of the town. Yes, it's still early days, but Faldo Davids and Benny McCarthy are doing well for themselves in their respective dugouts. United have won 3 of their first 4 matches and playing out to a 1-1 draw against SuperSports United in their last match. Something is clearly making them tick.
I think we had a fantastic pre-season. Our periodization plan was from the beginning, doing tactical work from day one, and yeah, you can see the players are definitely on a fitness level. It's very good, but of course with the step by step pushing the boundaries week by week, so that's the steps in the next coming months.
Cape Town City are only in their second season in the ABSA Premiership. In their first season, City won the Telkom Cup and finished 3rd in the ABSA Premiership. Their new coach, McCarthy, holds the record of international goals for South African with 32, and he's also the only South African to have won the UEFA Champions League. McCarthy, who has a UEFA A coaching license, is now imparting his knowledge to the current crop of players.
At the end of the day, it's all about the team, you know, all about my team. The boys, they fight for each other, they work hard, they stress me a lot, but, you know, they together when they're on the pitch, and I think they have fun. You know, we don't play beautiful football, but football is about winning. And slowly but surely, we keep collecting them, and I'm happy with that.
McCarthy's City have their work cut out early in the season, facing ABSA Premiership and MTN 8 defending champions Bidvest Vets twice. The Citizens have so far passed the test, beating the Clever Boys in league and cup matches.
It's very difficult, you know, but we got to break it down and we got to be better. Our final ball, but lessons you learn every day, every week in football. So the lessons is, you know, you score in the first half, make it 2-3-0.
PSL matches will resume on the 12th of September. One of 6 matches on that evening will be KZN Derby when Amazulu will host Maritzburg United. Mtutozi Ndlovu, SABC News.
Now staying with football news, but going a little further afield, Liverpool dismantled Arsenal in a 4-0 humiliation at Anfield, and both Chelsea and Manchester United were imperious in their dispatching of their respective opponents over the weekend. Let's take a quick look at some of the goals scored over the weekend.
There's his take. Massive put up highest. Bellery was last man for Arsenal. Salah has half the field to himself. Mane's joining him. Salah won't want him. Salah will score. Liverpool 3, Arsenal 0. Salah one way, Sturridge the other. Salah. Sturridge! Welcome to the party. Goals wherever you look in the Liverpool side. From the beginning and from the bench. 4-4 against Arsenal. Such a good strike of the ball. It's Morata. And it's poked into the corner exquisitely and expertly by Cesc Fabregas. And moments after a fairly dreadful corner, he comes up with the opening goal.
Well, I've seen Manchester United's open 2 games.
saw them demolish West Ham and Swansea.
Gay was caught in possession there. It's Conte, referee could have blown. When Moses went over on the edge of the box, as Khoikhoi. Morata makes it 2. Katarian takes by arrives, and United finally have their lead, courtesy of Marcus Rashford. Instinctive, firm, penetrative, United well. Lingard is onside. And Fellaini is on hand to twitch it in, and Manchester United's points are thereby surely safe. And yet again, a red-shirted substitute has delivered. Indeed, 2 of them.
Now, before I bring you the story about Caster Semenya, just a quick one on Alvaro Morata, Chelsea's new signing. He's the first player in the English Premier League to have ever assisted as well as scored in his first 2 games for his club. Now back to Caster Semenya, who just can't stop winning. And once again, she left her opponents in her dust when she totally dominated at the World Challenge in Berlin. Semenya shattered the world's best in the women's 600-meter event in a runaway victory of the Little Run race. The world and Olympic 800-meter champion charged ahead of the gun and left the rest of the field behind. Even the pace setter Ilona Usovic of Belarus unable to keep up, as the South African star stormed home in 1 minute, 21.77 seconds. She took 0.86 off the previous long-standing global mark, which had been held by Cuba's Ana Quirot for more than 20 years. Semenya, the only South African athlete participating at the meet, also smashed her own national best of 1 minute 25.56 seconds, which she'd set in Turku in June 2012.
1:11, no musiałby pobiec błyskawicznie, żeby rzeczywiście ten rekord poprawić. Caster Semenya, A.G. Wilson będzie poprawiony rekord. Tak jest.
Gotta love that commentary, the real deal, as you can tell. Now, Lewis Hamilton hung on to win the Belgian Grand Prix in an entertaining race over the weekend. The 3-time world champion led from start to finish as he made up valuable ground in the championship race.
Mercedes driver Lewis Hamilton has won the Belgian Grand Prix ahead of championship leader Sebastian Vettel. Hamilton's victory in his 200 race trimmed the gap at the top of the Drivers' Championship from 14 to 7. It was a reasonably clean start to the race as the cars went through the first corner without any incident. The drama started when Red Bull's Max Verstappen had to retire his car after losing power, resulting in his 6th non-finish this season.
Fail, one, fail.
The knock-on effect of that mechanical failure brought the double yellow flags, and Ferrari's Kimi Raikkonen failed to slow down under double yellows, giving the stewards a reason to punish him. And punish him they did, as they handed the Ferrari driver a 10-second stop-and-go penalty.
I'll let you know when we're going to come in and serve the penalty.
What do you mean? He was on the side of the road.
Kimi served his penalty and dropped from 4th to 7th. With a good car under him, Raikkonen first pulled up to Hülkenberg and passed him with ease. He then went after Bottas and Ricciardo, who were a fair way up the road. Then a moment of madness helped Raikkonen as the two Force Indians took each other out, with Sergio Perez leaving plenty of debris on the track and the safety car being deployed.
Once again, they have touched.
Raikkonen, who was closer to the pit stop, was immediately pulled into the pits by his team.
But look at this behind them.
With everyone bunched together behind the safety car, it was full-on attack when the safety car was brought in, and Valtteri Bottas was the biggest loser as he was passed by both Daniel Ricciardo and Kimi Raikkonen.
And Valtteri Bottas is the silver arrow that loses. Hamilton!
That is where the drama ended, as Lewis Hamilton held off a strong challenge by Vettel to win his 3rd F1 race at Spa-Francorchamps. Red Bull's Daniel Ricciardo stayed in 3rd and secured his 24th F1 podium. Next week, the Formula 1 circus will be in Monza, Italy.
Well done to Lewis Hamilton, becoming only the 4th driver to win his race, that in the 200th race that he races in, to actually win that one. Now, world #1 American Dustin Johnson beat his compatriot Jordan Spieth in a playoff to win the Northern Trust Golf Tournament in Old Westbury, New York. Johnson edged out the reigning Open champion after the pair finished on 267, 13 under par, after 4 rounds at the Glen Oaks Club. South Africa's Louis Oosthuizen finished in a tie for 10th place. That's a whole 9 strokes off the pace.
Johnson was in sublime form on the last day, overcoming a 5-stroke deficit over the final 13 holes. He stamped his authority with a closing 4 under par 66 to complete the tournament in 13 under par overall and force a playoff with his fellow American Spieth. Spieth carded an error-ridden 1 under 69 to allow Johnson to draw level. The pair finished 4 strokes clear of Spain's John Rahm and Jonathan Vegas of Venezuela. Johnson set up the victory with a brilliant approach shot on the first extra hole. His win was his first since injuring his back on the eve of the US Masters in April.
It was good to make the putt, especially when I really needed to make one. It felt really good, and I was definitely very excited. That's probably the most excited I've been on a golf course in a while.
Johnson also joined PGA champion Justin Thomas as a 4-time winner on the PGA Tour this season. Liesl Zankel, SABC News.
Now, the South African rugby side is on target to return to world number 3 in rugby after defeating Argentina 41-23 in Salta. It's the Springboks' highest tally of points on Argentine soil since 1996, and they also top the standings in the Rugby Championship.
Stronger challenges in the form of a rejuvenated Australia and a dominant New Zealand lie ahead, but for now the team has passed all the tests this year. Fly-off Elton Jantjies was instrumental in the Boks' first try, which was scored by Siya Kolisi. Argentina scored 2 tries in the game. The first was the result of very ordinary play by the Boks from a kick-off. Jantjies, however, restored his team's advantage as he crashed over and the Boks were 17-10 ahead at the break. In the second half, Kolisi and Jaco Kriel combined well, and Kolisi scored his second try. He was also named man of the match. After 56 minutes, the home side still had a chance, but their poor discipline made the Springboks' job easier. The big turning point was when Thomas Lavanini received his second yellow card, which is an automatic red card. The match officials also ruled that his deliberate knockdown prevented a certain try, and a penalty try was awarded to the Boks. Argentina's second try was once again the result of a mistake by the Boks under a kick. And to make matters worse, Andries Coetzee was also sent to the sin bin for 10 minutes when the referee decided his tackle on the try scorer was late and dangerous. Jean-Luc Dupré scored his first try for the Springboks, which earned his team a bonus point. The Springboks and All Blacks have 9 points each in the Rugby Championship, and South Africa are top of the log thanks to a better points difference. Harry Olivier, SABC News.
Now, just a quick update. News coming from the Springbok camp is that prop Kuni Oosthuizen is planning to undergo a scan to determine the scope of the rib injury he sustained in Salta over the weekend. Oosthuizen left the field in the second half of the Springboks' win over the Pumas and was replaced by experienced prop Trevor Nyakane. The Springbok squad returns home and then will assemble on Friday, from where they'll travel in 2 groups to Perth in Australia. And that, unfortunately, is where we're going to have to leave it with the show for today. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp with the entire team. Well, with Elvis and myself. As you know, Eben will be away for a few days because of family business that he's taken care of. And we do hope that you stay close and you keep on tweeting us, keep on commenting on our questions, and we'll see you tomorrow. Until then, Lisalang Sindhi.
With the stories of abuse from the other 8, but they haven't been ready to pursue any angles. They've offered their support, they've offered the comfort to the 8s, and it's been an amazing journey.
It feels like your heart actually literally sunk in your shoes.
It wasn't a long encounter. I think at the time I froze.
The way the criminal justice system deals with sexual violence is problematic. And I don't know, unless there's a fundamental change in many things, the way prosecutors deal with the victim in the matter.
For all investigative insights, stay tuned to Special Assignment every Saturday at 17:30.
Weather seasons. In the spring, seeds take root and vegetation begins to grow. The weather is warmer and often rainy. Animals wake and return from hibernation, often with newborns. In summer, temperatures are hot and sometimes heat wave cause trouble. Maize, groundnuts, and pumpkin farming is best in summer. In the autumn, temperatures cool again, and this is the harvest season for most cultures. In the winter, temperatures are cold with snow, cold fronts, rain, and sometimes gale force winds. This is our normal way of life here in the southernmost tip of Africa, but that's not always the case, as we on occasion have severe weather like heat waves, super strong cyclones, flash floods, tornadoes, droughts, and many more. Our environment is slowly becoming unsustainable to human life due to rising global temperatures. Catch more of this weather and related issues on Whether or Not every Friday at 10 to 5 South African Standard Time.
The Pan-African Parliament, as a legislative body, could go a long way in continuing to promote women's rights in all African member states.
Moon will be elected president. A decisive win by him will provide much-needed stability.